You're walking past two identical coffee shops. One hums with customers, the other sits silent. Without thinking, you drift toward the crowd. Why? Because your brain still runs tribal firmware that equates. Many people chose this is probably safe and valuable. Tonight, we dissect that reflex. You'll learn how strangers on Yelp, investors on Reddit, and friends at a party can silently steer your choices and how to keep your agency intact. Let's pull the first thread in our tapestry of dark influence. Social proof. Level 1. The social proof nudge. In a group setting, we don't trust our own senses. We trust numbers. If everyone else is doing it, they must know something we don't. That worked when survival meant following the herd away from predators. But today, that same instinct makes us buy junk, follow hype, and surrender opinions. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch proved it. He asked people to match line lengths. The answer was obvious, until fake participants gave the wrong answer out loud. 75% of real people copied the group, even though they knew it was wrong. That's social proof in action. Perception bends to fit in, and fitting in feels safer than standing out. Now add the digital layer. Most popular. Trending now? Thousands of fake reviews, bought likes, inflated stats. You're not evaluating reality. You're being nudged by what looks real. It's not just marketing. Cults use it. Movements weaponize it. If everyone believes, how could they all be wrong? Here's how you protect yourself. When something feels popular, stop. Ask, do I want this or do I want not to be left out? Because social proof doesn't sell you truth. It sells you belonging. And sometimes that comes at the cost of your mind. Level 2. You're asked a simple favor. Can you answer a quick question? You agree. It's harmless, it's polite. But that tiny yes just opened a door. A few days later, the second ask comes. Bigger, riskier. Can you donate? Can you commit? Can you give more? And without realizing it, you do. This is called the foot in the door technique. Get someone to say yes to something small, then build on that momentum with a larger request. It works not because people are weak, but because people want to stay consistent. When you agree to something even small, your brain updates its story. I'm someone who supports this. I already helped once. Saying no now creates tension, so the path of least resistance is yes. Salespeople use it. Scammers use it. Marketers, cults, campaigns, even therapists use it. Sometimes to manipulate, sometimes to motivate. The method is neutral. Intent decides the ethics. Here's the trap. If you don't pause after the first yes, you can be led further than you meant to go. So next time someone says, it's just a small favor, ask yourself, what's step 2? And do I actually want to take it? Every yes is a step. Make sure the next one still leads where you want to go. Level 3. You're smarter than most people. That's how it starts. A simple compliment. Smooth. Disarming. And before you even process it, you're already listening more closely. Why? Because your brain just rewarded that person with trust. They made you feel good, so now their words feel good too. This is the flattery hook, one of the subtlest forms of manipulation. You lower someone's defenses with a compliment, then slide in the ask. It doesn't even have to be genuine. It just has to be what they want to hear. Here's why it works. Flattery lights up the same brain regions as physical rewards, dopamine hits tied to pleasure and social validation. It feels good to be seen. It feels even better to be admired. And we're more likely to agree, comply, or support someone who makes us feel valuable. Marketers use it all the time. Only discerning people choose this brand. You're the kind of person who invests in their future. Suddenly, buying the product isn't just a transaction, it's proof that you're smart, evolved, exceptional. Cult leaders do it too. They tell new recruits, you see what others can't. You're not like the sheep. It's seductive. It frames joining the group as evidence of superiority. That's not belonging. That's grooming. But here's the dark twist. Flattery works even when we know it's manipulative. Studies show that even insincere praise can still influence us if it aligns with how we want to see ourselves. So how do you defend yourself? Pause when someone praises you, especially early in an interaction. Ask, what do they want next? If the compliment leads straight into a request, your guard should go up. Because real respect doesn't need a hook, and not every compliment is free. Level 4, Scarcity Tease. This won't be available much longer. Only 3 spots left. Limited edition. You've heard it. You've probably felt the tug, and maybe you've acted on it. This is the scarcity tease, the psychological trigger that tells your brain, if I don't grab it now, I might lose it forever. Scarcity works because it weaponizes urgency, the fear of missing out, the fear of regret. It doesn't matter if the item is valuable. If it feels rare, we want it more. Psychologists call this reactance. When our freedom to choose feels threatened, we become more motivated to act. You're not just buying something. You're fighting against loss. Retailers know this. They flash countdown timers. They show low stock alerts. They create fake wait lists and artificial exclusivity. Even when the product is mass-produced, the illusion of rarity drives action. Social groups use it too. You only get one chance to join. We're selective about who we accept. It makes the group feel elite, like you're lucky to be invited. And it pressures you to act before thinking. Even cults exploit scarcity. They say enlightenment is fleeting, that the opportunity to ascend is closing, that your transformation depends on acting now. Once urgency kicks in, rational thinking drops off. Here's the truth. Most things aren't actually rare. They're made to feel rare. Scarcity is often manufactured. So how do you resist? Pause when something feels rushed. Ask, is this real urgency or designed urgency? If you feel pressured to act fast, it's probably intentional, because anything worth having will still be worth having tomorrow. And if someone's trying to rush your choice, they probably don't want you to think too hard. Level 5, Authority Aura. They walk into the room, say almost nothing, and everyone listens. Why? Because of the lab coat, the suit, the badge, the title on the nameplate. That's the authority aura. When someone projects power, we instinctively defer. They don't need to explain themselves. They just look like they know what they're doing. This trick bypasses logic. We don't ask why they're right. We assume they are. Because challenging authority isn't just uncomfortable, it feels risky. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram ran one of the most disturbing experiments ever recorded. Subjects were told to administer electric shocks to another person, each time increasing the voltage. The person screaming in the next room was fake. But the pressure to obey was real. Why did they keep going? Because the man in the white coat said, "Please continue." That was enough. 65% of participants went all the way to the maximum setting just because someone sounded official. You see this in marketing. Doctor recommended. Certified by experts. Logos, credentials, authority cues everywhere. You see it in scams, too. The fake police officer calling about unpaid fines. The tech support rep with a serious voice and an employee ID. They don't ask, they tell, and we obey. Even cult leaders use it. Special robes, invented titles, sacred symbols. It's not just theater, it's psychological armor. If they look like they have the answers, followers stop asking questions. Here's the truth. Authority can be real, but it can also be staged. And in high-stakes moments, that difference can vanish. So when someone walks in with confidence, a uniform, and a tone that demands obedience, pause. Ask, do they deserve that authority? Or are they just wearing it? Because the aura is easy to fake, but your trust, that's harder to earn. Level 6, reciprocity token. Someone hands you a gift. You didn't ask for it. They say, it's free. But now you feel it, that pull in your chest. You owe them something, even if you didn't want it, even if it cost them nothing. That's the trap. This is the reciprocity token, one of the oldest, most powerful forms of social manipulation. Give first, make it look generous, then step back and let guilt do the rest. You think you're choosing freely, but what you're really doing is balancing the emotional scale. Here's how deep it runs. In a study, researchers had waiters leave a mint with the check. Tips jumped. Add a second mint. Tips jumped higher. Say, this one's just for you. Tips skyrocketed. Why? Because humans are wired to return favors, even when they're meaningless. We don't want to be seen as takers. We want to feel fair, balanced, generous. That's why charities send free calendars or stickers with donation requests. It's why street vendors press a bracelet into your hand before asking for money. It's why cults offer food, hugs, attention, then ask for your time, your loyalty, your obedience. The token might be small, but the pressure it creates, massive. Even hostage negotiators use it. Offer a small concession first, then ask for something bigger in return. It feels like cooperation, but it's choreography. And here's the twist. The more unexpected the gift, the stronger the pull. We feel the most obligated when we didn't see it coming. So how do you resist? Name it. Out loud if you have to. That was kind, but I don't owe anything back. Because if a gift comes with strings, it was never really free. Reciprocity is powerful, but it only works on people who are too polite to cut the thread. Level 7. You walk into a store and see a jacket marked $699. Right next to it is another one, $299. You grab the second one. It feels like a bargain. But here's the trick. That first price wasn't meant to sell, it was meant to anchor your brain. This is anchoring, a mental shortcut where the first number you see warps everything that follows. It's not logic, it's gravity. Anchors pull your expectations down or up, even when the number is random or meaningless. In a famous study, researchers spun a wheel numbered 0 to 100, then asked people to guess what percentage of African nations are in the UN. If the wheel landed on 10, people guessed low. If it landed on 65, people guessed high. The wheel was rigged. It had nothing to do with Africa. But the number stuck. That's how powerful anchoring is. Salespeople use it every day. Show the high price first, then offer the discount. Suddenly, $299 feels generous, even if it's still overpriced. Job recruiters do it too. Drop a salary number early. Every negotiation after that bends around the anchor. Even real estate agents use it. List a house at $1.2 million, expecting it to sell at $950,000. Buyers feel like they won, even when they overpaid. Cults and extremist groups do it ideologically. They start with radical ideas, then walk you back to moderate ones. The extreme anchor makes everything else seem reasonable. Here's the truth. Anchors don't need to be true. They just need to come first. And once they're in your head, they reshape your entire sense of value. So how do you fight back? Don't react to the first number. Discard it. Ask, what would I think if I saw this second or third, not first? Because once your mind grabs onto something, it's not easy to let go. And in the world of persuasion, the first idea always cheats. Level 8. Decoy pricing. You're choosing between two drinks. One is $3. The other is $7. You pick the cheap one. But then a third option appears, $6.50, smaller than the $7 one, barely better than the $3 one. Now suddenly, the $7 drink feels premium. Smart. Worth it. You didn't just upgrade, you were steered. This is decoy pricing, a manipulation trick where a bad option is placed beside a good one to nudge you toward a specific choice. The decoy is never meant to be picked. It's meant to make one of the others look irresistible by comparison. Researchers tested this in the real world. At a movie theater, people were offered a small popcorn for $3 and a large for $7. Most chose the small. Then they introduced a medium for $6.50, barely cheaper than the large. Suddenly, the large seemed like a smart move. Sales skyrocketed. It works because we compare relatively, not rationally. We don't ask, is $7 worth it? We ask, is $7 better than $6.50? And once that contrast is in place, logic collapses. Luxury brands use it constantly. They add absurdly priced models, $20,000 watches, $5,000 handbags, just to make the $1,200 ones seem reasonable. SaaS companies do it too. 3 plans, basic, premium, and a bloated enterprise tier no one buys. But that expensive third option makes the premium look like value. Even extremist groups do this with belief systems. Introduce a shocking view first, then pitch a slightly less extreme one. It feels like compromise, and it's actually manipulation. So how do you avoid it? Look for the unreasonable middle, the option no one is really meant to choose. Ask yourself, would this choice still look good if the worst one wasn't here? Because when decoys are on the table, the smartest move might be walking away from all 3. Level 9. It's probably nothing, but you don't want to take that risk, do you? That's how it starts. No shouting, no panic, just a seed of doubt, a hint of danger, and the quiet suggestion that acting now is the smart thing to do. This is a fear appeal, not the scream-in-your-face kind, the soft kind, the kind that sounds like concern, but feels like pressure. Humans are wired to avoid loss, danger, and uncertainty, and when someone points to a possible threat, no matter how vague, our brains light up. Fear hijacks reason, and compliance feels like the safest escape. Marketers use this constantly. Don't get caught uninsured. Act now before your data is exposed. Missing this offer could cost you everything. They're not just selling a product. They're selling protection from a threat they created. Politicians do it too. If we don't act, the economy will collapse. If they win, your way of life disappears. It's not logic. It's alarm dressed as leadership. Even cults and fringe groups use it. They warn of external enemies. They promise safety, but only if you stay inside the group. Fear builds the walls. Obedience locks the door. The trick isn't in the fear, it's in the mildness. The fear isn't loud, it's quiet enough to seem reasonable. That's what makes it effective. You don't realize you're reacting emotionally until you've already moved. So how do you resist? When someone uses fear to steer you, stop and name it. Out loud if you have to. Ask, is this person informing me or nudging me? Is the fear specific or just convenient? Because mild fear doesn't feel like control, but it works just the same. And when someone makes you afraid just to sell you peace, you're not buying safety, you're buying silence. Level 10. You want someone to like you? Don't buy them a gift. Don't flatter them. Ask them to do something for you. It sounds backward, but it works. And it's one of the strangest tricks in the psychology of persuasion. This is the Ben Franklin effect, the counterintuitive idea that we grow to like people we've helped, not people who help us. The story goes like this. Franklin wanted to win over a rival politician, so he didn't try to charm him. Instead, he asked to borrow a rare book from his library. The man agreed. Franklin thanked him, and from that moment on, the rivalry vanished. They became friends. Why? Because the brain hates contradiction. If I help someone, I must like them, right? Otherwise, why would I bother? So rather than admit, I helped someone I dislike, the brain rewrites it as, maybe I do like them after all. And that's the trap. Manipulators use this all the time. Ask for a tiny favor, a form, a vote, a quick reply. It creates a foot in the door, but also an emotional thread. You feel invested. And once you're invested, you start defending the person you helped. You want the story to make sense. So you edit your emotions to match your actions. Even cult recruiters do this. Ask new recruits to help with chairs, food, logistics. It's not about chores, it's about ownership. You're not just attending, you're contributing. And now you're less likely to walk away. So how do you defend yourself? Ask, would I be doing this if I felt nothing for them? And do I like this person? Or just like the feeling of being useful? Because favors aren't always earned. Sometimes they're engineered. And sometimes, liking someone isn't the cause of helping. It's the result. Level 11. You sit across from someone. They lean in. So you lean in. They cross their arms. A few seconds later, so do you. You didn't notice, but your brain did. And in that quiet imitation, trust begins to build. This is mirroring, the subtle act of copying someone's body language, tone, or speech to trigger unconscious connection. It's one of the oldest social tricks in the book. And it works because we're wired for it. Humans are tribal animals. Sameness feels safe. Difference feels risky. So when someone reflects us back to ourselves, even subtly, we let our guard down. In experiments, waiters who repeated customers' orders word for word earned higher tips. Strangers who mirrored posture were rated as more likable and trustworthy. Even in negotiation studies, mirroring increased agreement rates by over 60%. Why? Because when someone acts like us, we assume they understand us. And when we feel understood, we stop questioning. Manipulators use this to build false intimacy. Copy your slang, match your energy, even mimic your breathing. It's fast, it's invisible, and it creates a shortcut to rapport. Dating coaches teach it. Salespeople weaponize it. Cults use it during early recruitment, mirroring tone, values, frustrations. Not to agree, but to blend in. If they seem like you trust them. And once trust is built, influence flows. But here's the dark twist. They don't need to believe what you believe. They just need to reflect it for long enough to win your confidence. So how do you resist? Don't just listen to what people say. Watch how quickly they start acting like you. Ask, is this connection natural or engineered? Because real connection doesn't require a mirror. It requires truth. And when someone reflects you perfectly, that might not be friendship. It might be strategy. Level 12. You're in a conversation. Someone says something that almost makes sense, but not quite. You pause, tilt your head. Your brain reaches to fill in the gap. That pause, that moment of mental fog, that's the opening. This is the confusion cue, a manipulation tactic that introduces just enough uncertainty to interrupt your critical thinking. Not a lie, not nonsense, just slightly off-balance logic that makes you stop and try to understand, while the manipulator keeps talking. Because if they can get you to think slower, they can persuade faster. Here's how it works. When we're confused, our brains shift from defending to decoding. We're less likely to argue, more likely to absorb, because we're trying to resolve the tension. Cult recruiters use it in speeches. Start with vague philosophy, add abstract metaphors, leave meanings open-ended. The listener projects their own ideas onto the message and mistakes that feeling for understanding. Scammers use it too. Technical terms, fake urgency, contradictory phrases like, "You've already won, but we need your verification." The moment you're mentally out of sync, you become easier to lead. Even some public figures use confusion deliberately, contradict themselves, speak in loops. If critics attack one meaning, they shift to another. They call it being misinterpreted. But confusion was the shield all along. It's not about sounding smart. It's about sounding just unclear enough to make you question your own interpretation before you question theirs. So how do you fight it? When something sounds wrong, but you can't explain why, stop. You're probably not missing something. They're muddying it on purpose. Ask, if they had nothing to hide, would they be this hard to follow? Because clear language is honesty, and confusion, that's often a feature, not a bug. Level 13. Everyone agrees. Most people are on board. No one's questioning this anymore. It sounds like reassurance, but it's not. It's pressure disguised as popularity. This is the false consensus, a manipulation tactic where someone pretends their opinion is the majority view, to make you feel alone if you disagree. And it works, because humans fear isolation more than conflict. We want to be right, but we need to belong. So when someone says, "Everybody already knows this," we don't challenge them. We challenge ourselves. It's used everywhere. In politics, most voters support this policy. In advertising, thousands have already made the switch. In conversations, honestly, everyone I talk to agrees. The claim doesn't need proof. It just needs confidence. And when no one objects, silence becomes consent. Cults rely on it. They present beliefs as universally accepted within the group. No dissent, no hesitation. So if you question anything, you feel like the outlier. And shame takes over. Online platforms amplify it. Algorithms push viral content, inflated likes, fake comments. You assume it's popular, so it must be right, or at least safe to repeat. But here's the trap. You're not being convinced. You're being outnumbered, on purpose. The goal isn't to change your mind, it's to make you too nervous to speak it. So how do you resist? Ask, do I know that this opinion is popular, or did someone just tell me it is? If it's so widely agreed upon, why are they still trying so hard to sell it? Because truth doesn't need a crowd, and consensus doesn't prove anything, especially when it's manufactured. When someone uses everyone to silence you, that's not agreement, that's intimidation. And the majority, sometimes it's just one voice, echoed loud enough to drown out the rest. Level 14. It's fine. I just thought you cared more. Ouch. Not a command, not even a request. But suddenly, you feel responsible. This is a guilt trip, light, a soft weapon used to shift control by making you feel like the bad guy for doing nothing wrong. It works because guilt is sticky. It lingers, and people-pleasers, empaths, and high-conscience individuals feel it most. The guilt tripper won't yell. They'll sigh, they'll pause, they'll subtly highlight how you've let them down, and wait for you to fix it. No direct blame, no instructions. just an emotional weight hung on your shoulders. Parents use it, partners use it, manipulators love it. You never call anymore. I guess I'll just do it alone. Again. I stayed up late helping you, but it's okay. It sounds like emotion. It's actually control. Because if they said what they wanted directly, you might say no. But guilt, that bypasses logic. Now you're not making a decision. You're redeeming yourself. Guilt trips can be light, but effective. A raised eyebrow, a shift in tone. You feel like you failed, even if you didn't. In cults or toxic groups, guilt becomes a loyalty tool. Not following the rules. You're not hurting yourself. You're hurting the group. You're being selfish. And if you leave, they're not angry. They're disappointed. The brilliance of the light guilt trip is that you punish yourself. They just supply the silence. So how do you fight back? Recognize the difference between disappointment and manipulation. Ask, are they hurt or are they hinting I should change? Would they still care if I said no? Because guilt can be a signal, but it can also be a leash. And if someone makes you feel bad just for having boundaries, that's not love. That's leverage. Level 15. You're amazing. I've never felt this way before. I can't believe how lucky I am to have found you. It feels magical, fast, intense, like destiny. But intensity isn't always intimacy. And sometimes affection is a trap. This is love bombing, soft, the calculated flooding of praise, attention, and affirmation to speed up emotional trust. It's not always romantic. Friends do it, bosses do it, even cults do it. Because when someone showers you with warmth, texts, compliments, deep conversations, it lowers your guard. And once your guard is down, influence begins. Here's why it works. The brain craves certainty and connection. Rapid affection feels like both. Your dopamine spikes. You start trusting too quickly. You feel seen when really you're being scanned. Then comes the switch. The attention dips. The compliments stop. And suddenly you're chasing what came freely just days ago. Now you're hooked. Not on the person, but on the pattern. Manipulators use this rhythm deliberately. Affection, withdrawal, craving, compliance. You bond to avoid the drop. You agree to avoid losing that high. In cults, it's textbook. Early recruits are flooded with love, hugs, admiration. You're special. You were meant to be here. It creates a euphoric blur. And before you know it, you're loyal to a fantasy. In relationships, it can feel like romance. But when love is rushed, without reason, without time, it's often a tactic, not a connection. So how do you defend yourself? Time. Real trust builds slowly. Ask, is this connection mutual? Or are they always leading it? Do they know me, or just know how to make me feel wanted? Because healthy love doesn't demand speed. It allows space, and anything that comes on too strong might be trying to own you, not know you. Level 16. Imagine being promised gold and handed glitter. That's the bait and switch. It's one of the oldest tricks in manipulation. Offer something attractive up front, then change the deal after someone's already emotionally or mentally committed. And it works because once someone's invested, even a little dash, they'll often go along with the switch just to avoid loss, friction, or embarrassment. It happens in sales. Unlimited plan for just $9.99. You click. Then it's, actually, that's only for the first month. Real price? $49. It happens in dating. They show you their charming best-self version, then reveal who they really are once you're attached. It even happens in cults. At first, it's all community, self-growth, belonging. Later, the real beliefs surface after you've bonded, shared secrets, built trust. You're less likely to walk away because leaving now feels like abandoning everything you've already given. Psychologists call this commitment bias. Once we've taken a step, clicked, said yes, shown interest, we want to stay consistent. Changing direction feels like failure, so we tolerate the shift, even when we wouldn't have accepted the new deal from the start. That's the genius and the danger of the bait and switch. You never agree to the bad deal directly. You slide into it. So how do you protect yourself? Pause when the offer changes. Ask, would I have said yes to this version if it were presented first? If not, you're not making a decision. You're managing momentum. Because manipulators don't just want agreement. They want commitment first. So resistance feels like betrayal. And if the switch feels too late to stop, it was designed that way. Level 17. You're in a group chat. Someone sends a vague message. Guess I'll just stop talking. Doesn't matter anyway. They don't ask for help. They don't explain what's wrong. They just leak emotion. And suddenly, everyone else feels the need to mop it up. This is the emotional labor leak, a manipulation technique that offloads the weight of one person's emotional state onto the people around them without a direct request. It's not a scream, it's a sigh, a passive withdrawal, a half-formed threat of sadness. It preys on empathy. Most people don't want to see someone suffer, especially if they think they've caused it. So, they rush in. Are you okay? What's wrong? Did I do something? Now the roles have reversed. The person leaking is no longer the emotional burden. They're the center of gravity. You are now cast as the fixer, the reassurer, the therapist. Over time, this becomes a loop. The person never has to communicate clearly because ambiguity fuels obligation. It's the perfect trap. The less they explain, the more guilty others feel. And it gets darker. People who chronically leak emotional labor often weaponize their fragility. They present themselves as too overwhelmed to ask for support, yet fully capable of judging others for not providing it. It's not always conscious, but it is always manipulative. So how do you defend against this? Step 1. Notice the pattern. Is this person consistently vague, withdrawn, or cryptic when upset? Do they expect comfort without clarity? Step 2. Flip the responsibility. Instead of fixing, ask, would you like to talk about it? If they say no, take them at their word. You're not cold. You're maintaining boundaries. Because emotional support is a gift, not a tax. And when you stop paying invisible emotional debts, you start reclaiming psychological sovereignty. Level 18. I just don't know how I keep getting these promotions. I'm honestly overwhelmed. They say it with a shrug, maybe even a laugh. But it lands like a punchline wrapped in humility. This is the humble brag, a psychological sleight of hand where someone slips their achievements into the conversation, camouflaged in faux modesty. It's not a statement of fact, it's a crafted impression. I'm successful, but I'm still relatable. Admire me, but don't feel threatened. And it works. Why? Because outright bragging triggers defensiveness, but cloaking it in vulnerability. That slips past the ego's defenses and into admiration territory. Humble brags aren't always obvious. They might sound like, ugh, I have to fly business class again for this work trip. Or, I'm so bad at interviews. I got 3 offers and can't decide. Each line injects status into the air while pretending not to. It's a manipulation of social perception, designed to elevate the speaker without making them look like they tried. But there's another layer. When someone humble brags, they often trigger 2 competing emotions in their audience: admiration and irritation. You want to praise them, but part of you feels played. That tension is by design. It keeps the speaker in control of how they're seen while making you second-guess your own reaction. So, how do you spot it? Ask yourself, would this sentence still be said if it weren't about status? If the answer is no, it's not modesty, it's marketing. And how do you respond? Don't feed the bait. Either redirect with sincerity, "That's great, what do you enjoy about it?" Or deflate it gently, "Tough life." The goal isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Because behind every humble brag is a hidden scoreboard and a player trying to win without revealing they're playing at all. Level 19. You hear it once and it passes. You hear it twice and it sticks. You hear it 5 times, and now you believe it, even if it's a lie. This is the repetition effect, a cognitive bias where familiarity gets mistaken for truth. Also known as the illusory truth effect, it's one of the simplest and most potent psychological tools of persuasion, and manipulators love it. Why? Because it bypasses logic and targets cognitive fluency, how easily your brain can process something. When a statement feels easy to understand, because you've heard it before, your brain registers it as more likely to be accurate. You're too sensitive. No one else had a problem. This is just how things are. Say it enough times and it starts to feel like fact, not manipulation. This technique doesn't need evidence. It just needs repetition across time, sources, or environments. Politicians do it. Propagandists master it. But it also shows up in personal relationships. That toxic partner who repeats, "You always overreact," even if you didn't. Or the coworker who keeps saying, "They don't value you here," until you start to feel it, even if no one else ever said it. Repetition creates grooves in the mind. Each repetition is a drop of water eroding resistance. Eventually, the message feels familiar, and familiarity feels safe. So how do you fight it? First, note frequency over content. If someone keeps saying the same thing, especially without new information, ask why. Second, check the original source. Did you believe this before it was repeated? Or did it creep in over time? Finally, name it. Say out loud, "That's the 3rd time I've heard this. Repetition doesn't make it true." Because once you call it out, its power weakens. Repetition builds illusions. Recognition shatters them. Level 20. You ask for help. They nod. You wait, and wait, and wait. This is foot dragging, the deliberate use of delay as a passive-aggressive tool of manipulation. It's not a refusal. It's not confrontation. It's something worse. Strategic inertia. The manipulator doesn't say no. They just slow everything down until you feel like the only way forward is to stop asking. Foot dragging thrives in ambiguity. "Oh, I thought you meant next week. I've just been so swamped. It's on my list. Promise." Each excuse is soft enough to avoid blame, but persistent enough to erode your momentum. At work, this looks like a team member who forgets deadlines until you just do it yourself. A manager who needs time to approve your raise. Forever. In relationships, it's promised change that never arrives. Apologies that trail into silence. Plans always in progress, never real. The goal isn't to delay randomly. It's to wear you down, to exhaust your willpower, to make inaction feel like your fault, not theirs. And when you finally give up or step in to fix it, they win. They didn't say no. You just stopped expecting yes. So how do you counter foot dragging? Document expectations. Make timelines explicit. Can you do this by Friday at noon? Now the fog has a clock. Follow up with clarity. If they miss the mark, say, "You agreed to this. Can you confirm when it'll be done?" Don't fill the silence. Let their delay create pressure on them, not you. Because the minute you start doing their job, they've succeeded. Foot dragging is slow-motion sabotage, but with clarity and consequence, you can break the stall. Level 21. You remember what happened. You remember what was said. But they tell a different story, one that sounds just believable enough to make others wonder if your version is off. This is parallel narratives, a manipulation tactic where someone constructs an alternative reality that runs beside the truth, not in outright denial of it, but close enough to blur the edges. It's not gaslighting, at least not yet. It's more polished, more socially strategic. This version of the story is crafted for third-party consumption, friends, colleagues, authority figures. In the original version, you set a boundary. In their version, you lashed out. In the original version, they failed to show up. In their version, they were shut out unfairly. The goal isn't just to distort the past, it's to plant enough doubt that your credibility weakens, not just in others' eyes, but eventually in your own. And it works because we trust repetition. We trust confidence. We trust social consensus. When enough people hear their narrative, calmly told, repeated with composure, it begins to overwrite the original, not because it's truer, but because it's easier to believe. So how do you defend against this? Write it down. Document interactions, dates, screenshots. Parallel narratives lose power when you bring receipts. Speak early and clearly. Don't wait to see how they spin it. Get your version into the world first, not emotionally, but factually. Watch the delivery. Liars often sound calm. The truth sometimes sounds emotional. Don't let tone become the metric for truth. Because in the end, parallel narratives aren't about what happened. They're about who controls the memory of what happened. And when you spot it early, you keep your story and your sanity intact. Level 22. They didn't yell. They were just passionate. They didn't lie. They misspoke. They didn't ignore you. They were respecting your space. This is semantic reframing, the art of using word choice as a weapon, not to clarify meaning, but to manipulate it. Language is reality's front door. Change the words and you change how people see the event behind them. It's not spin, it's psychological misdirection. Think of it like a camera lens. Shift the focus, blur the edges, and suddenly something harmful looks reasonable, or even noble. The trick lies in substitution. A manipulator replaces words with softer, safer, or more flattering ones. Manipulative becomes strategic. Cruel becomes honest. Controlling becomes protective. The reframing isn't random. It's designed to deflect blame, invite sympathy, or reclaim control over the story. Sometimes the target isn't even other people. It's you. You start telling yourself, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they're just wired differently. Maybe that wasn't an insult, just blunt feedback. Over time, the language you use to describe your reality becomes theirs. So how do you counter semantic reframing? Call it by its true name. Strip away the euphemism. That wasn't miscommunication. That was avoidance. That wasn't concern. That was control. Get precise. Ask, what do you mean by that? Vagueness is their shield. Force clarity. Reclaim your definitions. If someone insists on painting your pain with polite language, don't accept the brush. Because the moment you let someone rename your reality, you let them rewrite your boundaries. Level 23. I'm an open book, they say. And then they proceed to tell you almost nothing. This is faux transparency, a manipulation tactic where someone appears candid, vulnerable, or brutally honest, but only about things that don't cost them power. They might admit to past failures. They might overshare emotional stories. They might even confess a minor flaw just to signal trustworthiness. But when it comes to real accountability, to the choices that affect others, their openness has limits. This isn't lying. It's curated honesty. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because once you believe someone is being transparent, your guard drops. You stop asking questions. You assume what you see is what you get. That's the goal. Faux transparency is a trust shortcut, a way to appear authentic while keeping control of the narrative. It's used in politics. I've made mistakes, but I've always followed my heart. Relationships. I have a hard time communicating, but I'm trying. Work. I take full responsibility. Let's move forward. Each line sounds noble, but often it's a shield, a way to diffuse criticism without real change. So how do you spot it? Watch for emotional display with no material consequence. If someone shares a personal detail but avoids actions or decisions, they may be managing perception, not telling the whole truth. Look at the omissions. What aren't they talking about? What areas feel off limits, even when they say, "Ask me anything"? Compare words with behavior. True transparency costs comfort. Faux transparency buys trust on a discount. And when you see through it, you stop rewarding the performance. You stop confusing vulnerability theater for character. Level 24. How much do you think this painting is worth? You shrug. They say, "I've had offers for $10,000. Now, your guess isn't starting from zero. It's starting from $10,000. This is the anchoring trap, one of the most powerful cognitive biases in human decision-making. It works like this. The first number you're exposed to in a conversation, even if it's arbitrary, becomes a mental reference point, and everything you judge afterward is unconsciously pulled toward that anchor. Want someone to accept $70,000 for a job? Start by saying, "Most roles like this pay $50,000. Selling a car? Say similar models go for $18,000, even if yours is worth less. Want someone to think they're improving? Tell them their first score was 40, whether it was or not." Anchoring bends perception. And it works even when the anchor is irrelevant, absurd, or obviously planted. Your brain doesn't throw it out. It tries to adjust from it. But those adjustments are always too small. And that's where manipulation lives. Retailers use it. Was $299, now only $99. Even if it was never worth $299. Negotiators use it. Start outrageously high or low, then compromise. Manipulative people use it in arguments. You always do this. Now your brain tries to prove you're not always wrong, instead of questioning whether you're wrong at all. So how do you defend against anchoring? Name it immediately. Say, "That number feels arbitrary. Let's reset." Bringing it into awareness weakens its grip. Do your research beforehand. If you already know what something is worth, anchors can't move you. Set your own anchor first. If you're negotiating or framing an idea, introduce the number that serves your purpose before they do. Anchors are mental gravity, but when you spot the chain, you stop getting pulled. Level 25. I'm honestly so bad at this kind of thing. They say it while flawlessly delivering a pitch. They stumble over praise. They make fun of themselves before anyone else can. This is strategic self-deprecation, a psychological move where someone downplays their strengths to make themselves appear more likable, disarming, or relatable. It looks humble. It feels safe. But make no mistake, it's calculated. Why does it work? Because confidence without humility can trigger social resistance. But humility, even if staged, creates warmth, and warmth opens the door to influence. When someone makes fun of their own success, it reduces envy. When they highlight their flaws first, it shields them from critique. And when they fail publicly, it creates connection, because now you feel safe around them. Politicians use it to humanize themselves. Celebrities use it in interviews. Manipulators use it in relationships to distract from control, soften their image, or make you drop your guard. And the moment you think, they're just like me, you start trusting them more than you should. But here's the twist. Strategic self-deprecation isn't always fake. Sometimes it's real. But even when it is, it can still be weaponized if the timing, delivery, and intent are designed to serve power rather than truth. So how do you tell the difference? Watch the context. Is the self-deprecation followed by praise from others? Do they brush it off or bask in the correction? Check the imbalance. If they downplay themselves often but are quick to accept compliments, it's not modesty, it's bait. Ask, what does this disarm? Is it dodging accountability, preempting critique, masking dominance? Because when someone always goes low, it's worth asking what they're standing on to seem that small. Level 26. You're the only one I can count on. No one else gets it like you do. You're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you. At first, it feels like love, or trust, or respect. But if you listen closely, it's something else entirely. This is the flattery feedback loop, a psychological trap where praise is used not to uplift you, but to train you. Here's how it works. Step 1. You do something useful. Solve a problem. Stay calm. Take on more than your share. Step 2. They flood you with compliments. Step 3. Your brain releases dopamine. You associate their praise with worth. Step 4. Next time they want something, they don't ask. They flatter. And you give. And just like that, a pattern is formed. You start to seek that praise. You start doing things not because you want to, but because you don't want to lose their approval. The flattery isn't just validation, it's currency, a reward loop. And like any feedback loop, it becomes habit. Hard to break, even when it hurts. This tactic shows up in toxic workplaces. You're a lifesaver. Mind staying late again? Controlling relationships. You're the only person who understands me. No one else comes close. Manipulative friendships. You're so emotionally intelligent. I just need you to talk to him for me. What's sinister is this. The flattery always has strings attached. It's not love, it's leverage. So how do you break the loop? Ask yourself, would they still say this if I said no? Real praise stands alone. Flattery with conditions is control. Pause before you act. Is the action something you want to do, or something you feel obligated to do because of the compliment? Watch for patterns. If their praise only comes when you're useful and vanishes when you set a boundary, the loop is real. Praise should feel like light, not a leash. Level 27. Do you want to clean the kitchen now or after dinner? Sounds like a choice, right? But either way, you're cleaning the kitchen. This is faux choices, a manipulation tactic that presents multiple options, all leading to the same destination. It feels like freedom, but it's actually structured compliance. Because when someone gives you 2 or 3 paths, each one designed by them, they still control the direction. You just feel like you chose it. This tactic shows up everywhere. Parents use it. Do you want broccoli or peas? Not if you want vegetables, but which ones? Bosses use it. Would you prefer the weekend shift or the late night one? Both are terrible. But by choosing, you own the consequence. Partners use it. We can talk now or after you've calmed down. Either way, they set the terms. Faux choices are powerful because they create buy-in. The moment you choose, your brain feels ownership. And once you're inside that choice, you're less likely to resist, even if you're uncomfortable. It's a psychological sleight of hand. Control the frame, and you control the outcome. So how do you defend against it? Zoom out. Before choosing, ask, is this really a choice, or just different flavors of the same result? Name the constraint. You're allowed to say, actually, I don't like either option. Offer your own third path. Faux choices fall apart when you inject a real one. Because when someone says pick one, your power is in saying, why not neither? Level 28. At first, it feels like empathy. You see their pain, you want to help. But then, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, your needs don't matter. Your voice gets quieter. Because you've been cast in a role, not of partner or equal, but of rescuer, fixer, or even villain. This is victimhood as leverage, when someone weaponizes their suffering to control the people around them. Here's how it works. They position themselves as the one who's always been misunderstood, hurt, or abandoned. Their story is airtight. Every failed relationship was the other person's fault. Every hard moment becomes proof that they're owed something now. And if you ever raise a concern, they cry, they break down. They turn the spotlight inward and say, I can't believe you'd bring this up when I'm already going through so much. That moment, when your discomfort gets eclipsed by their crisis, is where the manipulation lives. Because now, if you push back, you're insensitive. If you leave, you're just like everyone else. If you ask for boundaries, you're punishing someone who's already in pain. And the worst part? Sometimes their suffering is real, but real pain doesn't give you the right to control others. This tactic shows up in romantic relationships. I've been through so much. Don't abandon me. Friendships. You know I'm fragile. How could you say that? Work. You can't criticize me right now. I'm dealing with a lot. So how do you respond without becoming cruel? Acknowledge the pain, not the manipulation. Say, I see you're hurting, but I still need to talk about this. Validate the feeling, not the behavior. Hold steady. You're allowed to maintain boundaries even when someone is upset. Their emotion is real. So is your limit. Refuse to be cast. Don't become the villain in their script just to keep the peace. You're not here to rescue. You're here to relate. Because the moment pain becomes a tool, it stops being a bridge between people and becomes a cage around them. Level 29. Things are hard now, but just wait. When this project ends, I'll finally have time for us. I swear, next month everything will change. This is the false future hook, one of the most seductive manipulation tactics. It works by dangling an ideal future, a vision so compelling, so emotionally charged, that you're willing to endure dysfunction today just to get there. It doesn't matter if the present is painful, unfair, or deeply broken. You stay because the promise of what's coming feels worth it. But here's the trap. That future. It keeps moving. Always one more task, one more sacrifice, one more chance away. I'll quit drinking after this stressful period. Once the kids grow up, things will go back to normal. Give me just a little more time. But time keeps passing, and nothing changes except that you get more invested. You rationalize, I've already come this far. They said they'd change. I just need to be patient. That's not patience, that's psychological bait. Because the longer you stay for the dream, the harder it becomes to walk away, Not because of love, but because of sunk cost. And manipulators know this. They sell the future, so you'll ignore the present. It shows up in toxic relationships. We're going to travel the world together, just wait. Exploitative jobs. This grind will pay off. Think long-term. Manipulative friendships. Let's do something big, someday. So how do you escape the hook? Demand movement, not promises. Ask, what's changing now, not later? Measure time, not hope. How long has this future been delayed? Hope that repeats without action is a leash. Take inventory of the present. Are you constantly postponing your needs? What if this is as good as it gets? Because someone truly committed to a better future starts building it with you today. Level 30. At first, it feels like support. They help you solve problems. They show up when no one else does. They seem irreplaceable. But slowly, your confidence erodes. You stop solving things without them. You stop trusting your own instincts. And then, without ever saying it, they've become your lifeline. This is the manufactured dependence play, a dark psychological tactic where someone builds your reliance on them, then uses that reliance to control you. Here's how it works. They enter your life offering help, sometimes genuine, often intense. They say things like, "You don't need to worry, I'll handle it. I know you better than you know yourself. Without me, you'd fall apart." And at first, it feels like care. But gradually, they do three things. Undermine your independence by making your past efforts seem flawed or foolish. Insert themselves into every solution, so nothing gets done without their presence. Erode your confidence, so you start believing they're essential. You end up smaller, more uncertain, more grateful than you should be. And that's exactly the goal. Because when you rely on someone for clarity, safety, or decision-making, you stop resisting. They become the authority, not through force, but by carefully cutting your legs and offering a crutch. This play appears in toxic relationships. I'm the only one who gets you. Overbearing leaders. This place falls apart without me. Controlling parents. You're not ready to do this alone. So how do you break the spell? Audit your autonomy. Ask, what have I stopped doing without them? Where do I feel incapable unless they're involved? Reclaim small choices. Start with basics. Where you go, what you eat, what you think. Rebuild the muscle they've weakened. Challenge the narrative. Are they helping because you need it, or because they need you to? Because help that makes you stronger is love. But help that keeps you weak is a leash disguised as loyalty. Level 31. I never asked for this. I hate being the one in charge. I wish someone else could do it, but no one ever steps up. Sounds humble, noble, exhausted, but watch their actions. Because this is the reluctant hero mask, a tactic where someone claims they don't want control while consolidating more and more of it. Here's how it works. They present themselves as the unwilling leader, someone who had to take charge, who hates the spotlight, who's just trying to keep things together. But somehow, they make all the key decisions. They get all the final say. They receive all the credit. And if you challenge them, they deflect. Why are you attacking me? I didn't even want this. I'm doing this for everyone, not myself. If you think you can do better, be my guest. But here's the twist. That self-effacing language, it's a preemptive defense. It makes them look selfless, disarms critique with martyrdom, builds loyalty from people who think they're sacrificing so much for us. It's not a power grab, it's a power performance. And it works, because people trust humility. And when someone appears reluctant, we believe they're less likely to abuse authority. But in this mask, reluctance is a costume, a way to hold power while avoiding responsibility for it. This shows up in charismatic manipulators. I didn't ask to be the leader. People just follow me. Corporate gatekeepers. I'm just trying to keep things from falling apart. Controlling friends. I only stepped in because no one else would. So how do you spot the mask? Track the results, not the tone? Who ends up with the influence? Who gets to decide? Watch for passive control. Do they reluctantly take the lead every time? Challenge the story. If someone truly didn't want power, they'd share it. They wouldn't hold it behind a sigh, because real humility doesn't need a stage, and true leaders don't need to pretend they're victims of their own influence. Level 32. They already knew your answer before they asked the question. Reverse engineering consent is a dark art, not of persuading, but of reconstructing your journey, then placing breadcrumbs you were always going to follow. This isn't about influence, it's about predictive manipulation. Imagine a marketer who doesn't pitch you a product, he pitches you a belief system. He shows you people you admire. He subtly makes you feel like you discovered the product. But behind the scenes, every step was scripted. Your problem, your pain, your solution, reverse engineered from your data. You think you're making a choice. You're actually playing out someone else's simulation. This tactic thrives in relationships too. A manipulator doesn't ask directly. They make you feel like you owe the decision. They predict your resistance, prepare answers in advance, plant guilt, signal affection, and remove alternatives. By the time the ask arrives, you've already built the justification in your own mind. They didn't force you. They just built the maze so that every turn led to yes. Here's how it looks in action. A friend lets you vent for weeks about your boss. Then one day says, "You should just leave, maybe even work with me." You think it's your idea. It wasn't. A cult doesn't begin with demands. They offer purpose, belonging. They map out your spiritual pain before you admit it exists. A political campaign doesn't fight your worldview. It mirrors it, then nudges it 2 degrees. You move voluntarily, unaware of the invisible scaffold they built under your feet. This tactic is brutal because you feel complicit. You don't just do what they want. You internalize it, defend it, swear it was your idea all along. To defend yourself, don't just analyze offers. Analyze the setup. Ask, why am I being told this now? What belief had to be installed earlier for this ask to work? Would I still want this if it came from someone else? Because when someone reverse engineers your consent, they don't just manipulate your decision. They hijack your identity. Level 33. No one tells you directly, but somehow you already know. The whisper network effect is the hidden bloodstream of manipulation. Information passed in quiet tones, veiled jokes, and strategic absences. It bypasses logic and targets your tribal instincts. You're not given an opinion. You're infected by one. Let's say you enter a new team. No one warns you about Sam, but you notice people wince when his name comes up. They leave him out of group lunches. Someone casually says, "You'll figure him out soon." That's the whisper. And it's powerful. It creates a sense of threat without evidence. The subject is never confronted. You're just nudged to avoid, distrust, or judge, not based on facts, but social currents you can't see. This technique shows up everywhere. A boss doesn't criticize you directly. He just praises your coworker in contrast, again and again. A friend never insults your partner. She just keeps saying, "I just hope you're okay," and frowning. A brand doesn't bash its competition. It just sponsors memes that mock outdated users. The key to the whisper network effect is emotional osmosis. You soak up suspicion without realizing it. No one needs to lie. They just tilt the floor, and let you slide. It's often used by manipulators who want deniability. They don't start the rumor. They just amplify the tone, share the post, pause at the right moment, and the damage is real. Reputations rot without evidence. People make decisions in atmospheres poisoned by silence and suggestion. To defend yourself, ask where your impressions come from. Who benefits if you distrust that person? Look for patterns. Do you feel negative about someone without a clear reason? Don't assume absence of accusation means absence of harm. Whisper networks thrive on ambiguity. In manipulation, what's unsaid is often the sharpest blade. Level 34. You don't know them. They've never met you. But somehow, you care. The parasocial hook weaponizes one-sided relationships. A person, celebrity, influencer, public figure, projects intimacy, warmth, vulnerability. You, the viewer, respond with real emotions, admiration, trust, even loyalty. But it's not mutual. It never was. This isn't friendship. It's a simulation of closeness designed to extract value. A YouTuber says, "I'm just like you." They share their daily routine, their heartbreak, their fears. You start rooting for them, defending them, buying from them. You feel like they'd recognize you in a crowd. They wouldn't. Parasocial bonds bypass skepticism. You forgive flaws, overlook red flags, and support choices you'd otherwise question, because your brain fills in the relationship like it's real. This tactic becomes dangerous when it's intentional. Influencers create artificial vulnerability to farm sympathy. Politicians use relatability to gain irrational trust. Cult leaders broadcast charisma to build loyalty without contact. The hook lies in emotional investment without reciprocity. They never ask for permission to enter your mental space. They just perform familiarity until you let them in. And the payoff? You click, you buy, you follow, you obey. Parasocial manipulation thrives in loneliness. The more isolated the viewer, the more potent the bond. People begin to take life advice from a stranger who edits every moment of their public self. They adopt their values, defend them like family, lose perspective. To protect yourself, notice when affection forms without actual connection. Be wary of someone who constantly says, "I'm just being real with you." Ask yourself, have they earned your trust or manufactured it? This is level 34. And if someone online feels closer than your friends, you might already be hooked. Level 35. You're not being asked for money. You're being asked for something far more powerful, your care. Empathy extraction is a manipulation tactic that disguises itself as vulnerability. It's when someone presents pain, struggle, or trauma, not to connect, but to control. The moment you feel sorry for them, you've surrendered leverage. The more you care, the less you question. They'll frame themselves as misunderstood, as victims, as fragile, not because they want healing, but because your pity buys them influence. The tactic thrives in emotionally intelligent circles. People who value compassion are the easiest to manipulate through it. The manipulator knows how to tell just enough of a sad story to activate your instincts to protect, to validate, to support, even when logic screams that something's off. At work, it looks like, "I've been going through a lot. I just need you to cover this one thing." In relationships, "You can't leave me now, not after everything I told you." On social media, a teary confession followed by a link. A trauma story ending with merch, a cry for help, timed perfectly with a product drop. They create a debt of emotion. You feel cruel if you pull away. And once you're emotionally entangled, they can ask for more, your time, your energy, your silence. Empathy becomes the leash. And when they're called out, they flip it. "Wow, I thought you cared." This is how good people are turned into shields, flying monkeys, and silent enablers. They believe they're being kind, when in truth, they're being used. Empathy extraction doesn't require lies. It just needs selective storytelling. To defend yourself, track why the vulnerability is shared. Is it to build connection or to create guilt? Ask yourself, are you helping or being handled? Not every wound needs your hands to heal it. Some just want your sympathy on tap. Level 36. It starts with a whisper of hope, a reward, a change, a breakthrough just over the next hill. But every time you get close, the hill moves. The empty promise loop traps people with perpetual anticipation. You're never outright lied to. You're just told soon, almost, or just wait a little longer. And because you've already invested time, energy, or emotion, walking away feels like admitting defeat. So you stay. The manipulator doesn't need to deliver. They just need to keep you believing that they will. This tactic shows up in toxic workplaces that promise a raise after the next review cycle. Manipulative partners who say, "I'll change, I'm working on it," or "just give me time." Scammy online programs that dangle six-figure success but keep upselling steps you aren't ready for yet. The goal isn't to fulfill the promise. It's to anchor you in hope. And it works, because humans are wired to avoid loss. Once we commit, we want the payoff. We hold out, even when evidence says it's never coming. The longer we wait, the more invested we feel. The more invested we feel, the harder it is to leave. This is the psychological sinkhole. And the manipulator, they just keep resetting the loop. You're so close. It's just around the corner. Trust the process. But the process never ends. To defend yourself, set deadlines for promised outcomes and stick to them. Ask, has this person ever delivered? Not, do I believe they will? Trust patterns, not potential. The empty promise loop is powerful because it doesn't break trust all at once. It bleeds it, drop by drop, while feeding you just enough hope to stay thirsty. The most dangerous chains aren't iron. They're the ones we call maybe soon. Level 37. No one told you to obey. No one threatened you. And yet, you did exactly what they wanted. Welcome to the silent compliance contract, a manipulation where expectations are never spoken, only assumed. There's no rule book, no warning, no explicit demand. Just a subtle pressure to conform, delivered through tone, timing, or omission. You're not forced to act. You just feel like you should. It's when your boss forgets to mention the weekend deadline, but leaves the spreadsheet open on your desk. When a partner never says, "don't go out," but makes you feel guilty every time you do. When a friend goes quiet the moment you speak your mind, and you take it as punishment. These are nonverbal contracts, emotional agreements you never signed but feel bound by. The manipulator's power lies in what they don't say. They don't ask for favors. They create a rhythm where not helping feels like betrayal. They don't forbid behaviors. They let silence sting until you self-correct. They don't argue. They just withdraw affection, attention, or opportunity until you realign. And you comply. Not because they said to, but because you learned what happens when you don't. This tactic is slippery. You can't point to a quote. You can't prove coercion. You just feel it, in the tension, in the withdrawal, in the consequences that never get named. It breeds obedience without confrontation. To defend yourself, ask, what would happen if I ignored this cue? Break the illusion by forcing clarity. Do you want something from me? If they refuse to own their expectations, don't carry them. The silent compliance contract works best on people who avoid conflict, people who'd rather adapt than disappoint, people like most of us. Manipulators don't always raise their voice. Sometimes they lower yours. Level 38. You didn't want it, until they said there were only 2 left. Then suddenly, you couldn't stop thinking about it. This is perceived scarcity framing, the psychological manipulation that uses artificial limits to hijack your decision-making. It doesn't matter if the product is mass-produced. It doesn't matter if the offer will return tomorrow. What matters is the illusion that something rare is about to vanish, and only you can grab it. Scarcity flips your instincts into overdrive. In a tribal brain, scarcity meant survival. Food, shelter, allies. If it was running out, you fought to get it first. That same primal trigger now fires when you see only 1 left in stock. Offer expires in 4 minutes. Doors closing soon, forever. But the truth is often simple. Scarcity is engineered. The marketer doesn't run out of seats. The influencer doesn't run out of links. The manipulator doesn't need your answer now. They just don't want you to think too long. Why? Because time invites logic, and logic ruins the sale. You'll also see this tactic in relationships and power dynamics. A partner who hints they're ready to leave if you don't get serious. A boss who dangles a fake promotion window. A coach or guru who claims their wisdom is only available for the next 10 people. They aren't offering something rare. They're selling the feeling of urgency to bypass your defenses. To defend yourself, ask, would I want this if I believed it would still be here next week? Delay your reaction. Scarcity wants speed. Power requires pause. Recognize when urgency is their tool, not your truth. Perceived scarcity framing doesn't sell value. It sells fear of regret, wrapped in a ticking clock. Level 39. You're being tested, and you don't even know it. A last-minute favor. A sudden silence. An invitation you're expected to decline, just to prove your devotion. This is manufactured loyalty testing, the manipulation technique where someone creates situations designed to measure your allegiance, not based on honesty or alignment, but on obedience under pressure. It begins subtly. If you really cared, you'd show up. Let's see if you've got my back this time. I didn't tell anyone else, only you. The setup is always the same. A forced moral crossroads where saying no looks disloyal, and saying yes costs you time, energy, boundaries, or ethics. But here's the trap. The test isn't real. It's crafted, deliberately, to see if you'll bend. Loyalty should be earned through trust. But manufactured loyalty tests invert the logic. They demand loyalty as proof, not as an outcome. You'll find this tactic in romantic manipulation. I need to know you'd pick me over your friends. Toxic workplaces. We're seeing who's really committed during this crunch. Cultish groups. You'll be tested. Only the faithful remain. Each time you pass their test, the next one escalates. Your refusal becomes betrayal. Your silence becomes guilt. They never say, this is a test. But the consequences always feel like punishment for non-compliance. To defend yourself, ask, am I being asked to prove something that should already be known? Watch for consequences that seem emotional, not logical. Remember, trust is built, not extracted. Some people don't want loyalty. They want leverage disguised as love. Level 40. They could respond. They just don't. Not because they're speechless, because silence is the script. Strategic silence is the manipulation technique of deliberately withholding words, reactions, or responses. Not out of passivity, but with precision. It weaponizes absence. It creates tension, doubt, and the need to chase. Silence becomes the loudest tool in the room. You've seen it. You send a vulnerable message. They read it. Then, nothing. You present a boundary. The reply? A blank stare. You ask for clarity. They go radio silent until you fold. This isn't forgetfulness. It's controlled neglect. The manipulator knows you'll fill the void with overthinking. Did I offend them? Are they testing me? Should I apologize just to move on? That's the trap. You begin managing their silence instead of their behavior. You chase closure they're never offering. And worst of all, you start lowering your standards just to break the tension. Strategic silence thrives on your need for resolution. It mimics power. In meetings, it forces concessions. In relationships, it creates guilt. In negotiations, it makes the other party flinch first. Silence becomes dominance. Not through aggression, but through stillness, through patience, through psychological absence. To defend yourself, notice when silence has shifted from calm to control. Don't chase clarity from someone invested in confusion. Recognize the difference between space and punishment. Not every manipulator shouts. Some just wait while you unravel yourself. Level 41. They don't need to lie, they just need to bury you in truth and half-truths until you drown in the details. Information overload is the manipulation tactic of overwhelming someone with so much data, noise, or context that they can no longer process clearly, question critically, or respond confidently. It's not about what's said, it's about how much is said, so fast, so often, so thick, that clarity dies. This tactic shows up in corporate manipulation, reports filled with charts, jargon, and footnotes that obscure the real problem. Toxic relationships, hour-long rants that twist facts, dates, and emotions until you just shut down. Political spin, when a spokesperson talks circles around a question, flooding the air with just enough words to sound intelligent, but never to inform. The goal isn't confusion, it's submission through mental exhaustion. When your brain is bombarded with too many variables, you stop analyzing and start defaulting. You nod to escape the moment. You agree just to end the onslaught. You accept because resistance feels impossible. And that's where the manipulator wins, because now you've surrendered not to their argument, but to their momentum. Information becomes noise, noise becomes pressure, pressure becomes consent. To defend yourself, don't match their speed. Slow the tempo. Ask for one point at a time. Force focus. Say, we're not moving forward until this is clear. Information is power, but overload is control. Level 42. You feel sorry for them. You make exceptions. You bend your own boundaries because they've been through so much. That's not empathy. That's compassion currency being cashed in. This dark manipulation tactic turns past pain into present leverage. The manipulator doesn't ask for support. They expect compliance because of what they've suffered. You know how hard things have been for me. After everything I've gone through, I thought you'd understand. You're really going to say no to me? The moment you disagree, set a boundary or say, not this time. They don't argue with logic. They argue with victimhood. And it works. Because humans hate appearing cold. We're wired to help the wounded. So when someone invokes their trauma, grief, or hardship as a shield, we freeze. But here's the truth. Suffering does not entitle someone to power. Their pain is real, but it doesn't excuse control, guilt-tripping, or rule-breaking. The manipulator turns your compassion into a currency you never agreed to spend. You give them time you don't have, energy you can't spare, forgiveness they haven't earned, all because saying no feels cruel. Compassion becomes a debt they never repay. To defend yourself, separate their story from their behavior. Ask, would this still be inappropriate if they hadn't told me that? Remember, Empathy should inform your decisions, not override your judgment. You're allowed to care about someone's past without letting them purchase control over your present. Level 43. You did everything they asked. You showed up. You improved. You delivered. And still, they weren't satisfied. Welcome to shifting goalposts, the psychological manipulation that keeps you locked in a loop of chasing approval that never arrives. At first, the criteria are clear. If you just do this, we're good. So you do it. But the moment you deliver, the bar moves. Actually, now I need this too. Then, it's not just about that anymore. The manipulator rewrites the finish line again and again, not to reflect progress, but to maintain control. It's not about improvement. It's about keeping you in perpetual performance mode. This tactic works because it mimics growth. You feel like you're almost there, just one more step. But the truth is, there is no finish line. You'll see it in toxic managers. We're still not impressed. Try harder. Controlling partners. I never said I'd be happy with just that. High-pressure groups. True loyalty means going further. Shifting goalposts create learned inadequacy. You internalize the idea that you're never enough, no matter what you give. And so you give more, and more, until you forget that the rules were once different. To defend yourself, ask, has the agreement changed without discussion? Write things down. Track what was originally expected. If every achievement triggers a new demand, it's not growth. It's a trap. Progress isn't when you improve. It's when they stop moving the goal. Level 44. They don't explain it. They don't define it. They just say, if you know, you know. This is gatekeeping through vagueness, a manipulation tactic where exclusivity is manufactured by deliberately withholding clarity. The goal isn't to inform you. The goal is to make you feel outside the circle, while they stand just inside looking smug. This isn't about protecting secrets. It's about broadcasting that you're not one of them. The phrase, if you know, does three things instantly. Signals insider status, shames outsiders without saying it directly, creates curiosity laced with insecurity. You see it in online subcultures that hint at knowledge but never share it. Lifestyle influencers who say, I can't say what it is, but it changed my life. People who bring up past events vaguely, just to remind you that you weren't there. The genius of this tactic is how little effort it takes. Just a smirk, just a phrase, just enough ambiguity to make you question whether you're behind. And the result? You try harder, to decode them, to impress them, to earn access to something that may not even exist. They don't need power. They just need you to believe they have it. To defend yourself, ask, is this actually valuable or just deliberately obscured? Recognize when mystery is being used as social dominance theater. Refuse to chase clarity from someone invested in confusion. If you know isn't a phrase. It's a psychological gate, one you don't need to walk through to be free. Level 45. First, they get you to wear the label. Then they make you defend it. This is the identity investment trap, a manipulation tactic where someone binds your self-worth to a belief, role, or group, and then uses that attachment to control you. At first, it feels empowering. You're not just a supporter, you're family. You're one of the real ones. You've come too far to back out now. But soon, every choice you make isn't about logic. It's about protecting the version of you they've sold you, and you've bought into. You see this in toxic communities, where doubting the group means betraying yourself. Exploitative jobs. You're not like the others. You care. Manipulative relationships. You're not the kind of person who just walks away, right? The trap is deep because the bait feels noble: loyalty, commitment, being better than average. But here's the con. They're not appealing to your values. They're exploiting your need to stay consistent with your past self. This is the same psychology behind sunk cost fallacy. But instead of money, you've sunk your identity. Leaving isn't just difficult. It feels like self-erasure. To defend yourself, ask, would I still choose this if I hadn't already committed to it? Separate who you are from what you've joined. Be willing to evolve, even if it means stepping away from something you once loved. If someone makes you prove who you are by staying trapped, then what they offered you wasn't identity. It was leverage. Level 46. They praise you, but only when it benefits them. This is conditional validation, a manipulation tactic where approval is dangled like a treat, given not for who you are, but for how well you perform to their script. It feels like love. It feels like recognition. But it's really control, dressed as encouragement. Now that's the version of you I like. I'm proud of you. Finally. See? You're great when you listen. You're not being validated. You're being trained. Each compliment reinforces compliance. Each withheld nod creates anxiety. You begin to shape yourself around their reactions, chasing that next hit of approval. Over time, you start second-guessing your instincts, repeating behaviors that win praise, even if they cost you, fearing that one wrong move could flip everything. Conditional validation works because it mimics care, but real care accepts you even when you're not performing. This tactic is common in manipulative parenting. You're only lovable when you behave. Toxic leadership. You only matter when you deliver. Codependent relationships, where affection is tied to obedience. The manipulator becomes the mirror, and you forget how to reflect your worth from within. To defend yourself, ask, would they still respect me if I disagreed? Notice when praise feels like relief, not affirmation. Detach your value from their shifting mood. Validation is a gift, but when it's weaponized, it becomes a leash. Level 47. It's either this, or we're done. If you don't decide now, I walk. Take it or leave it. This is false ultimatums, the manipulation tactic of presenting fake choices under pressure, forcing you to act out of fear, not freedom. The threat feels urgent, the stakes feel high, but the deadline, the consequence, the finality, almost always a bluff. Manipulators use false ultimatums to create artificial now or never tension. They want you reactive. They want your logic offline. They want your anxiety making decisions, because anxiety is easier to control than clarity. You see this in toxic relationships. If you loved me, you'd do this right now. Hard-selling tactics. This deal expires the second you walk away. Power games. Agree or don't bother coming back. The brilliance of the false ultimatum is its performance. They act like their mind is made up, but inside they're watching yours unravel. Why? Because the longer you sit with the choice, the more obvious it becomes. They're afraid of losing you, and the ultimatum is just a test of control. To defend yourself, ask, what would happen if I didn't respond today? Call the bluff. Step away. Because real consequences don't come with threats. They come with clarity. You don't owe anyone a decision made under duress. Pressure is not proof. It's often just fear in disguise. Level 48. Relax, I was just joking. Wow, can't you take a joke? Don't be so sensitive. Sound familiar? This is the just joking jab, a manipulation tactic that hides cruelty, criticism, or passive aggression behind the flimsy mask of humor. It's a jab designed to sting. followed by a smile, then a backpedal, all to make you question your reaction. The manipulator says something offensive, disrespectful, or revealing. But if you call it out, suddenly you're the one who's overreacting. They flip the script. You're too serious. You don't get it. You're ruining the vibe. But here's the truth. If the joke only works when you feel small, it's not a joke. It's a power move. This tactic thrives in toxic friend groups where mocking is disguised as banter. Hostile workplaces where bullying is brushed off as office culture. Manipulative relationships where jabs are served with a grin to avoid accountability. It trains you to doubt your instincts. You hesitate to speak up. You wonder if maybe you are too sensitive. And over time, your silence becomes their permission. To defend yourself, respond with calm precision. Explain the joke to me. Refuse to laugh at your own expense. Remember, humor doesn't require harm. The most dangerous insults are the ones that wear a smile. You're not humorless for standing up. You're just done being the punchline. Level 49. Remember how good things used to be? We had something special back then. You've changed. This is the nostalgia trap, a manipulation tactic that weaponizes your fondest memories to pull you back into unhealthy patterns. It doesn't matter how far you've come, how much you've grown, how clearly you saw the red flags. The manipulator reaches into your past, grabs a golden moment, and holds it up like proof that everything was perfect. They're not reminding you, they're reframing you. Suddenly, your doubts feel disloyal. Your growth feels like betrayal. And your present self is gaslit by your own memories. It wasn't that bad. Maybe I overreacted. We were so happy back then. But here's the trick. Nostalgia is selective. It edits out the pain. It glosses over the manipulation. It floods your brain with oxytocin and edits out the facts. The nostalgia trap works because it disorients your emotional compass. You begin comparing your current discomfort to your idealized past, and you forget why you left in the first place. You'll see it in toxic exes trying to lure you back, cult-like communities promising the return of the good old days, manipulative leaders evoking past success to excuse present abuse. To defend yourself, anchor to facts, not feelings. Write down what actually happened, not just what you miss. Remember, you're allowed to cherish a moment without returning to the person who corrupted it. Nostalgia isn't always a memory. Sometimes it's bait. Level 50. They don't yell, they don't threaten. They don't even seem manipulative. They just know what's best for you. And somehow you keep obeying. This is the benevolent puppet master, a psychological tactic where control is disguised as care. They guide, they nudge, they suggest, but behind every gentle gesture is a tightly wound string. I'm just trying to help. Trust me, I've been through this before. I only want what's best for you. It sounds generous, but every decision they guide you toward benefits them. You start to ask for their opinion before making any move. Feel guilt when you choose something they wouldn't. Doubt your instincts, because they always seem so wise. This isn't love, this is choreography. You're being shaped, not supported. The benevolent puppet master plays long-term. In relationships, they steer your goals, your friends, your lifestyle, always for your own good. In workplaces, they position themselves as your mentor while quietly stifling your autonomy. In families, they use concern as a leash, keeping you dependent while claiming they're proud. They don't need obedience. They need influence. And the more you internalize their wisdom, the tighter the strings get. To defend yourself, ask, would they still support me if I chose something they don't like? Notice when advice becomes expectation. Reclaim your right to make flawed, independent decisions. Control wrapped in kindness is still control. Level 51. They're not louder than you. They're not smarter than you. But somehow they always seem more righteous. This is manufactured moral high ground, a manipulation tactic where someone elevates their opinion, not by proving it's right, but by claiming it's morally superior. They don't win the argument. They declare the argument beneath them. I just care more about people. Some of us actually have integrity. I couldn't live with myself if I thought like that. Sound familiar? It works because it bypasses logic and hijacks your self-image. Now, it's not just about who's correct. It's about who's good. And when they frame their stance as the ethical one, any challenge from you suddenly looks like cruelty, ignorance, or selfishness. This tactic thrives in toxic debates, where disagreement is painted as immorality, workplace politics. If you really cared about the team, you'd agree. Gaslighting relationships. I'm the only one here acting from love. They don't have to argue the details. They just claim the halo and let you defend yourself from under it. Over time, you stop pushing back. Not because you agree, but because you're tired of being made to feel like the villain. To defend yourself, ask, are they arguing the idea or just claiming the moral spotlight? Refuse to accept shame as a debate tactic. Remember, disagreement isn't unethical. Compliance isn't virtue. Righteousness is powerful. But when it's manufactured, it's just another form of manipulation, wearing white robes. Level 52. Before you can call them out, they're already hurt. Before you bring up the issue, they're already crying. This is the preemptive victim, a manipulation tactic where someone adopts the role of the wounded party before you get the chance to hold them accountable. It flips the script. You were ready to confront them. You had facts, boundaries, clarity. But now you're the aggressor, and they're just the poor soul trying their best. I can't believe you'd think that of me. You know how hard things have been lately. You're making me feel like a monster. And suddenly, the issue isn't what they did. It's how your words are affecting them. They don't defend their actions. They defend their feelings. They redirect your focus away from what they did to how you made them feel by pointing it out. This tactic is disarming because it pulls your empathy into the spotlight. You backpedal. You soften. You let them off the hook. And once again, your pain is sidelined. You see this in toxic relationships, where accountability gets buried under emotional deflection. Manipulative friendships, where guilt becomes a shield. Gaslighting dynamics, where hurt becomes performance, not honesty. To defend yourself, don't argue with their emotions. Return to the facts. Say, I hear that you're upset. We can talk about that. But first, we need to address what happened. Refuse to abandon your truth just because they got there first. Victimhood is not always innocent. Sometimes it's a tactic, a costume worn to avoid responsibility. Level 53. Ever felt like things are constantly spiraling, even when they don't have to? Deadlines suddenly appear. Plans constantly change. You're always catching your breath, but never catching a break. This is the manufactured chaos loop, a manipulation tactic where someone keeps you in a state of stress, urgency, or confusion. Because calm people ask questions, but overwhelmed people, they obey. Chaos becomes the smoke screen. It makes you reactive instead of reflective. And while you're busy putting out fires, they're quietly tightening control. Sorry, it's just been crazy lately. We'll figure it out tomorrow. It's not the right time to talk about that now, but the right time never comes. Because chaos isn't an accident. It's a system, A system that keeps you distracted, breaks your routines, undermines your ability to think clearly. You'll see it in toxic workplaces, where last-minute changes become a culture. Abusive relationships, where emotional whiplash keeps you too off balance to leave. Manipulative leaders who manufacture instability so they can be the only source of solutions. They don't want clarity. They want your bandwidth burned. So your energy goes to surviving, not resisting. To defend yourself, slow everything down. Chaos demands speed, so respond with intentional delay. Start writing things down. Patterns can't hide from paper. Ask, who benefits from this constant disorder? When chaos is constant, it's not a storm. It's a strategy. Level 54. It doesn't sound like a threat. It sounds like a choice. You can do whatever you want, but I don't know what that means for us. Of course, you're free to go. I just won't be here when you get back. I'm not stopping you. I just need to do what's best for me. This is the soft ultimatum, a manipulation tactic that dresses control up as reason and pressure up as boundaries. It's not, do what I say or else. It's, do what I say or accept the consequences that I've quietly engineered. It works because it wears a mask of maturity. It sounds calm, it sounds measured, but underneath, it's still coercion, just with a softer tone. The soft ultimatum is built to shift the emotional burden to you. Make their rigid demand feel like your thoughtful decision. Let them hold the power while appearing reasonable. It thrives in relationships where one partner makes independence conditional. Work environments where employees are free to say no, but know the cost. Social circles where disagreement means quiet exclusion. It's powerful because it bypasses resistance. It doesn't provoke your defenses. It leverages your desire for harmony. And suddenly your freedom feels expensive. To defend yourself, ask, is this really a choice or just a consequence wrapped in kindness? Name it. That sounds like a boundary, but it feels like an ultimatum. Remember, you're allowed to make decisions without navigating someone else's silent punishment. When threats wear silk gloves, they still leave fingerprints. Level 55. Who are you? Really? To your partner, you're too emotional. To your boss, you're not assertive enough. To your friends, you're always so intense. Everywhere you turn, a different version of you is being reflected back. Contradictory, confusing, fractured. This is the fragmented identity game, a psychological manipulation tactic where others intentionally warp your self-image by feeding you clashing feedback, selectively reinforcing only the traits they want you to believe. You're such a drama queen. You always take things too personally. You never follow through. You're too cold. You're too sensitive. The contradictions aren't accidental. They're a weapon. Because when your sense of self fractures, you start to outsource your identity. You stop trusting your gut. You start craving their validation. You let them define who you are because you're not sure anymore. This tactic works best when the manipulator controls your environment. You're isolated from people who mirror the real you. Feedback is served in private, then contradicted in public. In relationships, it looks like love one day, criticism the next, until you no longer know which version is true. In workplaces, it shows up as praise followed by undercutting, keeping you off balance and dependent. Why do they do this? Because people who don't know who they are easier to control. To defend yourself, gather mirrors that reflect you back clearly, friends, journaling, therapy. Track the contradictions. When different people give wildly different labels, they're projecting, not observing. Reclaim your narrative. That may be your view, but I don't accept that as my identity. Confusion isn't always chaos. Sometimes it's construction, a trap built from mirrors to make you forget who you are. Level 56. They don't start by cutting you off. They start by nudging you away. Your friends don't really get you. Your family's kind of toxic, don't you think? I just want us to have our own world. This is the gradual isolation blueprint, a manipulation strategy that doesn't slam doors. It slowly closes them, one by one, until the only voice you hear is theirs. At first, it looks like intimacy, like someone craving your full attention, like love. But in reality, it's a control system, because isolation shrinks your options, and fewer options mean more compliance. Here's how it unfolds. Subtle undermining. They don't attack your support network outright. They cast shadows. Little doubts. She's kind of jealous of you, you know. Guilt framing. When you try to reach out, they make you feel bad. I thought we had plans tonight. Or, why do you always run to them when I'm here? Emotional dependence. Over time, they become your primary, maybe only, emotional outlet. So when the manipulation begins, you've got no safe audience to reality check it. It's effective because it's slow. By the time you realize how isolated you are, the bridges are already burned or rotted through silence. You'll see this tactic in abusive relationships, where emotional monopolies are mistaken for passion, cult-like groups, where outsiders are painted as threats, toxic workplaces, where loyalty means cutting off dissenting voices. To defend yourself, guard your connections like oxygen. Pay attention to who they want you to stop talking to, and why. Say, people who love me support my support system. Total control doesn't require chains, just enough silence that your voice starts to echo back exactly what they want. Level 57. You owe them. Not because they say it outright, but because the ledger is always open and your account is always just a little short. After everything I've done for you, I stuck by you when no one else did. You wouldn't even be here without me. This is the perpetual debt frame, a manipulation tactic that creates a psychological IOU that never expires. It doesn't matter what you do now. The past is their anchor, and your guilt is the chain. Even small favors are turned into leverage. Acts of kindness become emotional currency. And you're constantly reminded that you're in overdraft. Why it works. Most people want to be fair. Reciprocity is baked into our wiring, so when someone suggests you're indebted, your brain flinches, and your behavior adjusts. This tactic turns your integrity against you. You'll find yourself saying yes when you mean no, justifying their poor behavior, suppressing your needs to even the score. But here's the twist. The score is never even. They always gave more. They always sacrificed more. And if you question that, you're ungrateful. It shows up in family dynamics where, after all I've done becomes a weapon. Romantic relationships where support comes with strings. Work environments where past mentorship is used to demand present obedience. To defend yourself, ask, is this generosity or an investment with unspoken interest? Say, I appreciate what you did, but gratitude shouldn't be used to silence me. Track the pattern. Is every favor followed by a subtle invoice? Kindness with a hook isn't kindness. It's credit dash with compounding emotional interest. Level 58. They're always the victim, always struggling, always fighting some invisible war no one understands. Even when they're in control, even when they hold the power, they frame themselves as the one who's barely hanging on. This is the manufactured underdog, a manipulation tactic where someone fabricates or exaggerates their disadvantages to gain sympathy, loyalty, and lowered accountability. I'm just not like those people who had it easy. People always underestimate me. You don't know what I've had to overcome. Here's why it works. We root for the underdog. It's a deep cultural bias. We're conditioned to support the struggler, the outsider, the one who beats the odds. So when someone presents themselves as fighting uphill, we instinctively give them the benefit of the doubt, excuse their flaws, offer more time, more empathy, more grace. But with manipulators, the struggle is a tool. It's not about truth, it's about leverage. You'll notice they exaggerate how much they've suffered. They downplay how much power they actually have. They weaponize their journey to silence critique. Criticize them. You're punching down. Set a boundary. You're just another person trying to keep them small. Catch them manipulating. They'll cry foul and reframe you as the oppressor. This shows up in toxic leadership, where the boss claims to be one of the team while hoarding authority. Romantic manipulation, where past trauma is used to justify present mistreatment. Social dynamics, where someone controls the room by controlling the sympathy. To defend yourself, ask, is this person struggling or performing struggle? Notice the imbalance. Do they take up more space than they leave for others? Say, I support your journey, but that doesn't give you a free pass to harm me. Not all underdogs are powerless. Some wear struggle like armor, not to protect themselves, but to control you. Level 59. You didn't even notice the leash tightening. They just stopped replying, smiled a little less. Suddenly, your stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? Welcome to attention withdrawal conditioning, one of the most subtle but potent manipulation tactics in the psychological arsenal. This trick uses your own biology against you. When someone gives you steady attention, affection, validation, replies, interest, your brain builds expectation loops. You begin to predict that input. Your dopamine system adjusts. It creates a rhythm. Then, that attention vanishes. No argument. No goodbye. Just quiet. And it hurts because the drop in stimulation feels like rejection, uncertainty, even loss. And here's the real trap. When they return, even slightly, it creates relief. Your brain lights up. You cling. You chase. That's the point. This isn't about ghosting. It's about control. It's the deliberate manipulation of attention as currency. Used by narcissists, marketers, cult leaders, and even insecure partners, this tactic builds dependency. Because your nervous system is wired for rhythm and reward. Break the rhythm, and you spark anxiety. Bring the rhythm back, and you become addictive. The manipulator teaches you that attention is not a gift. It's a reward, something you earn. Or worse, beg for. You stop asking if their behavior is fair. You start asking how you can win them back. This is operant conditioning in human form, but instead of food pellets and buzzers, they're using your sense of worth. You'll justify anything just to feel noticed again. So, how do you resist it? You notice the pattern. Does their affection feel conditional? Do they disappear when you assert a boundary? Is their silence louder than their presence? And most importantly, are you adjusting your behavior just to avoid losing their attention? Because if so, you're no longer seeking love or connection. You're negotiating for scraps in a psychological economy they control. Break the rhythm. Reclaim the baseline. Don't let silence become your trainer. Level 60. You trust them, but you don't know why. Their voice sounds certain. Their tone is calm. They speak in stats, quotes, authority. And without realizing it, you surrender your skepticism. This is manufactured credibility, the illusion of expertise crafted without substance. It's not about being right. It's about sounding right. In a world where confidence is mistaken for competence, manipulators use tools, not facts, to create the appearance of authority. Here's how they do it. Precision speak, using unnecessarily complex jargon to confuse and impress. False referencing, citing obscure sources or studies without proof, knowing most won't check. Strategic name-dropping, mentioning institutions, experts, or affiliations to create proximity to credibility. Confidence pacing, speaking slowly, then accelerating during conclusions to imprint their message more deeply. Visual authority, wearing lab coats, glasses, or formal wear to shortcut your critical thinking. But the crown jewel? Certainty. The more sure someone sounds, the more your brain relaxes its defenses. This isn't your fault. It's evolutionary. Early humans relied on the most confident voice in the tribe to lead through chaos. And now, anyone can buy a microphone, wear a suit, and start a podcast. Anyone can fake the signals of competence while pushing misinformation, ideology, or control. It's not what they say, it's how they present it. Even silence can be used to manipulate. A well-timed pause creates drama. An intentional breath makes them seem measured. These are performance tools, not truth indicators. And the scariest part? It works best when you don't even know you're being persuaded. So how do you protect yourself? Ask, do they ever admit uncertainty? Real experts know nuance. Do they encourage independent thought? Or are they pushing conclusions? Do they offer sources you can verify? Or vague references that can't be traced? Because once credibility is manufactured, it's hard to undo. You'll find yourself defending them before you've even checked the facts. That's not loyalty, that's conditioning. Level 61. It starts with concern. I'm just looking out for you. I care about your well-being. But something doesn't sit right. Your reality starts to blur, and you can't tell if it's love or control. Welcome to benevolent gaslighting, the most disarming form of psychological manipulation. It doesn't scream, it doesn't accuse, it protects you while rewriting you. Traditional gaslighting makes you question your memory, your feelings, your truth. But this variant hides inside kindness. It tells you, you're too sensitive to handle that. Let me take care of it. It's just too complicated for you. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to stress you out. It sounds gentle, but it's corrosive. Because over time, your independence dissolves, your confidence erodes. You stop making decisions. You stop trusting your gut. And here's the genius of it. You don't fight back, because it feels like they're doing it for your own good. It's often used by overbearing partners, controlling parents, cult leaders, concerned friends or mentors. They reframe your capability as fragility. They reduce your autonomy while wearing the mask of protection. And when you finally push back, they weaponize your reaction. After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me. I was just trying to help. You're being paranoid again. They spin your resistance into guilt. You end up apologizing for trying to reclaim your own mind. So how do you spot it? Ask yourself, does their help make me feel smaller? Do I feel less capable when they're involved? Is their version of love always accompanied by limits? Because real care doesn't need to erode your autonomy. It empowers you. It doesn't replace you. Kind words can lie, and sometimes the softest voice is the one that rewrites your reality. Level 62. You don't get ghosted. You get softened, gently blurred out of focus. The responses take longer. The warmth cools by degrees. Favors once offered freely now come with hesitation. No confrontation. No clear ending. Just a deliberate erosion of intimacy until you're left doubting if it was ever real. This is the slow fade, a manipulation tactic disguised as distance. It's not disinterest, it's strategy. Because by fading, the manipulator avoids accountability. They don't have to explain, justify, or own the impact of their withdrawal. Instead, they place the burden on you to interpret the silence. It starts when you ask a question, and the reply comes a day late. Vague, polite, but empty. You brush it off. But the next time, they ignore it completely. Still, they like your post. Still, they drop a casual, "Hope you're well." Just enough to keep you hanging. Just enough to keep you hoping. That's the game. The slow fade creates cognitive dissonance. You know something's changed, but you can't name the moment. You don't want to overreact. You fear being called dramatic. So you adapt, send fewer messages, ask fewer questions, shrink yourself into acceptability. And that's exactly the point. Because the slow fade isn't just a disappearing act, it's a control mechanism. It trains you to self-regulate your expectations. It conditions you to accept less, to settle for crumbs, to fear confrontation more than neglect. And the worst part? It grants the manipulator plausible deniability. If you call them out, they'll say, "What are you talking about?" "I've just been busy." If you walk away, they'll tell others, "I never pushed them out. They left." Meanwhile, they've already moved on, already filled the emotional space they once let you believe was yours. To break free from the slow fade, you don't need closure. You need clarity. You need to stop translating absence into ambiguity. If someone wanted you in their life, you'd know. If they're fading, let them disappear. You deserve presence, not performance. Level 63. You're drowning and someone throws you a lifeline. They pull you out, hold you close, whisper, "You'd be lost without me." What you don't realize is they're the one who pushed you in. This is reverse rescue dependency, a psychological tactic where someone subtly sabotages your stability just to later save you, reinforcing your need for them. At first, it looks like care. They help you finish a project after something went wrong. They guide you through a meltdown they indirectly caused. They calm the chaos they quietly orchestrated. You feel grateful. You feel safe. You feel like you can't function without them. That's the trick. They create artificial instability, then position themselves as the only solution. This builds a loop of learned helplessness. They start solving problems they engineer. They get credit for being there, while you're gaslit into thinking it's all your fault. And when you finally notice the pattern, they double down. "After all I've done for you." That line seals the cage. This tactic shows up in manipulative relationships, controlling workplaces, and narcissistic family dynamics. It's not just about control, it's about dependency masquerading as protection. Here's how to spot it. You constantly need their help for problems that seem to follow you only around them. They're always the hero, never the cause. You feel guilty even questioning their role. The antidote? Pause. Zoom out. Ask yourself, would this issue exist if they weren't in my life? Because if someone keeps being your lifeline, you need to check if they're also holding you underwater. The rescue isn't always real. Sometimes it's part of the trap. Level 64. You're finally talking. The room goes quiet. You explain how you've been hurt, how your boundaries were crossed, how things need to change. And then they pivot. They say they're hurt by how you brought it up. They say they feel attacked. They say you should have handled it differently. Suddenly, it's not about your pain anymore. It's about theirs. This is spotlight shifting, the subtle psychological maneuver of rerouting attention and moral weight from the harmed party to the one causing harm. And if done well, it not only stops the confrontation, it makes you feel guilty for ever speaking up. The manipulator flips the emotional script. They hijack the narrative mid-conflict. They'll cry before you do. They'll raise their voice so yours disappears. They'll just not understand why you're being so mean. The aim isn't understanding, it's control. It's to reframe them as the real victim in the eyes of others. And you begin to self-edit. You tiptoe, pad your tone, anticipate their reactions. You become so careful about how you speak that you stop speaking altogether. Now the original issue remains unresolved, and you wear the blame. This tactic is devastating in close relationships. It erodes trust. It stifles growth. It makes you doubt your reality in favor of theirs. Want to counter it? Hold the frame. When they redirect, return. When they say, "That hurt me," calmly respond, "We can talk about that after we finish discussing what I brought up." If they refuse, you've learned what you needed to. You weren't having a conversation. You were being cornered. Spotlight shifting works because it exploits your empathy. But remember, empathy without boundaries becomes a weapon used against you. Keep your light. Don't let someone else direct your stage. Level 65. You're given two options. Neither feels right, but you're told it's one or the other. No nuance, no compromise, no space in between. That's the trap of forced binary decisions, a manipulation tactic that corners your mind into believing you only have two ways out. Both are designed by the manipulator. Both benefit them. And that's the game. They create an artificial fork in the road. Example, either you trust me completely or you're accusing me. Either you forgive me now or you're holding a grudge forever. Either you're with me or you're against me. Notice the pattern, the illusion of choice. It pressures you into fast decisions, usually under emotional stress, removing your ability to reflect or question. This works because humans crave clarity. We hate cognitive dissonance. So when someone forces a false choice, we rush to resolve the discomfort by picking one, even if neither sits well. But here's the twist. They make sure one option feels morally wrong, emotionally cruel, or socially risky. So you almost always choose the other, the one that keeps you compliant, quiet, controlled. It's psychological chess, and they've already moved two steps ahead. You feel like you chose, but you were never choosing. You were reacting. To fight back? Refuse the frame. Say, "I don't accept either of those options." Or, "I see more than two outcomes here." When you name the manipulation, the spell breaks. You reclaim your cognitive space. Remember, when someone gives you two doors, ask who built the hallway. Dark tactics don't need chains. Sometimes all they need is a cleverly crafted question. Level 66. You ever notice how the past always feels warmer than it really was? That's not just memory. It's manipulation. Manufactured nostalgia framing is the art of distorting the past to control your present. Politicians use it. Cults thrive on it. Toxic partners whisper it. "Remember how happy we used to be," they'll say, strategically erasing the context that made you leave in the first place. This isn't about reminiscing. It's about weaponized memory. People who want control often recreate a golden era that never truly existed. They'll cherry-pick emotions, rewrite the rules, and paint the past as a utopia, one you're now failing to live up to. A marketing campaign doesn't sell you soda. It sells you summer afternoons from your childhood. A manipulative leader doesn't promise a better future. They promise a return to what we've lost. This tactic leverages your emotional memory bias, the brain's tendency to filter pain out of the past and exaggerate comfort. The more uncertain the present feels, the easier it is to sell a fictional past as salvation. It's not just external. Sometimes you do it to yourself. You glamorize that old job, that old relationship, that old version of you, not because it was better, but because the unknown scares you. You anchor to memories not to remember, but to escape discomfort. That's the trap. Manufactured nostalgia makes you cling to cycles that broke you, stay loyal to brands that exploit you, and romanticize pain just because it's familiar. The real danger: you stop imagining forward, you stop building. Because you've been convinced the best version of life is already over, and someone else owns the door back in. But that's the manipulation. Memories are not instructions, they're echoes, and sometimes those echoes are faked. Level 67. You're at a dinner party. A controversial topic comes up. You disagree, strongly, but you say nothing. Why? Because your brain does the math. The social cost of honesty might be exile. So you nod, smile, and surrender. That's not passivity. That's programming. Tonight's tactic hijacks that program and weaponizes your primal fear of social risk. This is social risk hijacking, a manipulation technique that doesn't aim to change your mind. It aims to make expressing your mind feel dangerous. Humans evolved in tribes. Back then, rejection meant death. That instinct is still buried inside you. Public disagreement triggers a visceral alarm. Stay in line, or you're out. This tactic exploits that alarm, and the manipulator doesn't even have to be aggressive. They just raise the perceived stakes. They'll speak loudly, in groups, with confidence. They'll frame dissent not as difference, but as deviance. Only idiots think that. It's disgusting how some people still believe. The goal? To make neutrality feel like the safest hill to die on. This isn't about facts. It's about fear. The masterstroke. The manipulator often surrounds themselves with subtle social signals, group laughter, performative outrage, or a carefully chosen audience who will affirm their take. It creates a hostile environment for authenticity. And it works. Most people will trade truth for safety if the risk feels immediate. Here's the kicker. Even silent manipulation can be effective. No open confrontation needed. Just a raised eyebrow, a prolonged pause, a well-timed smirk when someone speaks up. It plants doubt. Did I just make a mistake by talking? Over time, this cultivates a climate of self-censorship. People don't just avoid arguing. They begin editing their thoughts before they even fully form. And that's the real power. Once someone internalizes the risk, the manipulator doesn't need to intervene again. The target becomes their own censor. Want to recognize this in the wild? Look for phrases like, "Everyone agrees." You wouldn't want to be one of those people, right? We all know what that kind of opinion means. To resist social risk hijacking, you don't need to be confrontational, but you do need to be aware. Ask yourself, is the silence in this room because everyone agrees or because everyone's afraid? Because once fear controls the volume of conversation, truth becomes a whisper. And manipulators love silence, especially when it's self-imposed. Level 68. You don't need a crown to rule a room. You just need people to believe you're above them, without ever saying it aloud. That's the genius of covert hierarchy. Unlike overt dominance, which invites resistance, covert hierarchy installs you at the top by making others internalize their place below. It's not declared, it's inferred. And once accepted, it becomes self-policing. Here's how it works. You arrive. You don't rush to speak. You wait. Others lean in. That pause signals confidence. You don't over-explain. You let your words hang. You never ask for permission to lead. You act as though leadership was inevitable. You subtly demonstrate selectivity. Not everyone gets your time. Not everyone gets your attention. People start to perform for it. You offer compliments sparingly. Not because you're unkind, but because in a covert hierarchy, your approval is a scarce resource. People chase it because they start believing it means something. And most importantly, you let others talk more than you do. But when you speak, it's decisive, minimal, certain. You ask strategic questions. You don't solve, at least not right away. You redirect. You reframe. You create dependency not through force but through perceived elevation. And what happens next? They begin to consult you before making decisions, before making moves. Before trusting themselves, they look to you for cues, tone, tempo. That's the trap. They don't realize a hierarchy has been built, one where they're the follower and you're the invisible center of gravity. Covert hierarchy doesn't control through fear. It controls through implication. It builds authority without title, leadership without resistance, control without confrontation. And once established, no one questions the order because no one remembers the moment it was made. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it dangerous. Level 69. They walk into the room and immediately set themselves apart. Offbeat clothes, cutting sarcasm, disdain for the obvious. They don't want to be liked. They want to be misunderstood. That's the point. The manufactured misfit isn't just someone who doesn't fit in. It's someone who uses not fitting in as a weapon. They cultivate outsider status, not because they're excluded, but because it grants them immunity. See, once you wear the misfit mask, criticism feels like proof you're right. Isolation becomes a badge of honor. "You just don't get me" replaces accountability. Any pushback becomes oppression. Any disagreement, a witch hunt. It's a manipulation tactic dressed up as misunderstood genius. By painting themselves as victims of conformity, they shift the frame. They're not difficult. They're different. Not abrasive, ahead of their time. And people fall for it, because deep down, many of us romanticize the loner. We associate solitude with depth, defiance with authenticity. So we give misfits extra rope. We excuse the arrogance. We forgive the cruelty. We let them control the emotional tone of every interaction because we're scared to be the next person they say doesn't get it. And that's the dark magic. By claiming the edge of the room, they control the center. By saying, "I don't belong," they decide who does. They use alienation to gain authority, to silence critique, to never be wrong. And if they ever get too close to accountability, they vanish. They play the outcast again. Because once you're always the victim of groupthink, you never have to take responsibility. Beware the misfit who's too proud of their alienation. Sometimes they aren't pushed out. They choose to be out, so they can stay above. Level 70. Weaponizing compassion into compliance. You walk into a room, someone's crying. The atmosphere thickens. Your instincts kick in. Comfort them. Listen. Be kind. But then, the tears don't stop. The stories loop. The guilt begins. And slowly it dawns on you. You're not helping. You're being held hostage. Welcome to the empathy booby trap, a psychological manipulation that preys on your most human instinct, the desire to care. This isn't vulnerability, it's strategy. The manipulator uses their pain not for healing, but for control. It's calibrated sadness, rehearsed despair, just enough to make walking away feel like abandonment. You're not allowed to have boundaries, not without being made to feel cruel. They say things like, "No one ever stays when I need them." I guess I just expect too much. I thought you were different. Every sentence is a hook. You pull back, they cry harder. You set a boundary and they collapse. You question the story, now you're heartless. And the worst part? You start to believe it. Over time, this tactic reshapes your behavior. You check your tone before speaking. You tiptoe through your own emotions. You become afraid not of hurting them, but of the meltdown that follows. The trap works because you were raised to see empathy as moral. But when empathy is twisted into a leash, morality becomes manipulation. This isn't weakness. It's coercion in a cardigan. It's exploitation with mascara streaks. The pain may be real, but the performance has a purpose. So how do you escape? Separate pain from behavior. Someone can be hurting and still be responsible for how they treat others. Refuse binary roles. You're not heartless for walking away. You're not a savior for staying. Recognize the loop. If every interaction leaves you drained and ashamed, it's not connection. It's capture. Watch for timing. Empathy booby traps are often deployed right when you try to exit. And remember, empathy is a gift, not a debt. You owe people kindness, not compliance, especially when that compliance is extracted through suffering. The next time someone weaponizes their wounds, ask yourself, am I helping or am I being handled? Because in the wrong hands, your compassion is a loaded gun, and the trigger is your guilt. Level 71. You're not loved, you're evaluated. Every interaction feels like a silent audition. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you were too much, not enough, or just forgettable. That's not love. That's performance-based attachment, one of the most emotionally corrosive manipulation tactics in the playbook. Here's how it works. They never say, I'll only care about you if you're impressive today, but they don't need to. You learn it. Fast. Affection shows up only when you achieve, when you're impressive, useful, admirable. The second you falter, even just act human, warmth gets withdrawn. Their face changes. Cold shoulder, backhanded compliment. A sigh too long. They don't scream. They just let the silence grow sharp. This trains your nervous system to believe that love must be earned, not felt. That emotional safety is transactional. That approval is oxygen. What makes this tactic devastating isn't how loud it is, but how quietly it corrupts your self-worth. The manipulator plays the role of a benevolent gatekeeper. They're proud of you when you shine. But it's never unconditional. You're loved for something, never as something. This happens in romantic relationships, where one partner is always chasing validation. In parenting, where a child becomes a high achiever to keep the peace. And in workplaces, where employees grind to burnout for a manager who doles out praise like rationed water. Over time, you internalize a belief, I'm only safe when I'm exceptional. So you work harder, you please more, you shrink your needs, suppress your feelings, and become an over-functioning, anxious version of yourself, just to maintain basic connection. And that's the trap. Performance-based attachment isn't just manipulation, it's a slow erasure of identity. You don't get to be seen, only measured. The antidote: start noticing who celebrates you when you're not performing, who sits with you when you're dull, off, quiet, or struggling. That's where real connection lives. Because you were never meant to audition for belonging. You already qualify, just by existing. Level 72. They don't need to control you outright, just get you to question who you are. Manufactured identity recalibration is the manipulation of self-concept. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And over time, it reshapes how you see yourself, so you slowly become easier to control. It starts small. Maybe you're assertive, creative, emotionally open, but they label you overly sensitive, too much, unrealistic. They don't tell you what to be, they just frame what you are as flawed. So you start editing yourself, bit by bit. Your strengths reframed as liabilities, your boundaries selfish, your passions childish, your values naive, your voice too loud, your needs a burden. And soon you begin to seek their guidance, not because they're wise, but because they've eroded your certainty. You doubt yourself. You wait for approval. You reshape your tone, your clothes, your dreams, until you're no longer sure where you end and they begin. This isn't identity discovery, it's identity dismantling. The goal is to slowly rewire how you think about yourself so they can install a new, more compliant version. One who asks less, tolerates more, apologizes quickly, and questions everything except them. It often masquerades as mentorship, helping you grow, or being honest. But it's not feedback. It's a campaign, a long game of psychological erosion. This happens in relationships, families, workplaces, even ideologies. The manipulator paints a version of the better you, but it's never for your benefit. It's for theirs. They don't want you to grow. They want you to shrink into something more manageable. Here's how you spot it. If someone's version of your growth always leads to less self-trust, more compliance, and a smaller voice, it's not growth. It's grooming. The antidote? Reclaim authorship of your identity. Reconnect with people who reflect you back accurately, not manipulatively. Journal your values. Speak them aloud. Remind yourself who you were before their edits. Because you're not a version to be downloaded. You're a person to be protected. Level 73. You call someone out. They've lied or crossed a boundary. You expect backlash, maybe excuses, but instead, they crumble. I'm trying my best. I didn't know how to fix it. Suddenly, you're the one offering comfort. And just like that, they're off the hook. That's not emotional honesty. That's strategic regression. It's the act of faking helplessness. To avoid responsibility, they weaponize weakness. Cry before they're questioned. Break down before they're held accountable. It's not immaturity. It's a shield. And it works. This tactic flips the emotional script. You started with facts. Now you're juggling feelings. They've gone from culprit to victim, and you're stuck holding their guilt for them. Watch for the pattern. They only collapse when they're cornered. Their fragility appears the moment control slips. They make you feel cruel for expecting accountability. That's not vulnerability. It's a tactic. You'll see this in toxic partners, emotionally manipulative coworkers, even in certain public figures. They feign the breakdown. You soften your stance. They win the game. How do you resist it? Don't engage with the performance. Hold steady. Use calm, neutral phrases like, I hear that you're upset, but this still needs to be addressed. Final thought. Tears can be tactics. Breakdowns can be power plays. And helplessness can be control in disguise. Don't confuse collapse with truth. That's strategic regression. Level 74. You meet someone, and they make you feel like the center of the universe. Every message is instant. Every word is praise. You're everything they've ever wanted, until you're not. Suddenly, you're too much, or not enough. They pull back, they get cold, and you're left rereading texts, wondering what you did wrong. Welcome to the idealization devaluation loop, a manipulation cycle designed to keep you chasing emotional highs that never come back. It starts with idealization. The manipulator bombards you with praise, flattery, attention, creating an artificial intimacy. It feels electric, but it's bait. Then comes devaluation. Subtle at first, a backhanded compliment, delayed replies, less enthusiasm, eventually outright criticism or withdrawal. You're confused, hurt, but you remember how good it used to be. So you try harder. And that's the trap. You don't realize you've become addicted, not to them, but to the version of you they manufactured during idealization. You're not chasing the person. You're chasing the feeling, the rush of approval, the fantasy. The manipulator knows this. That's why, after they pull away, they may occasionally throw you crumbs of warmth, just enough to reignite your hope. This is called intermittent reinforcement. It's not just manipulation, it's behavioral conditioning. Over time, your self-worth becomes entangled in their approval. You question yourself, you walk on eggshells, you blame yourself when the cold shoulder returns. But here's the dark brilliance. They've made you emotionally dependent. You no longer think about whether they deserve you. You're just trying to get back to who you were in their eyes. That version of you, it never existed. It was a tool. This loop is used in toxic relationships, workplaces, even cults. It keeps people bonded to their abuser by weaponizing hope, nostalgia, and emotional volatility. So how do you break it? Recognize that idealization was the manipulation, not the fall from it. The person who made you feel like a god and then tore you down wasn't showing love. They were securing leverage. Stability doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like calm, like consistency, like freedom. Escape the loop. Reclaim your narrative. And next time someone puts you on a pedestal overnight, ask yourself what they're planning to do once you fall off it. Level 75. You've likely heard this before. After everything I've done for you. It's a phrase loaded with invisible weight. Not because you actually owe anything, but because someone has planted that seed. Welcome to manufactured emotional debt, a psychological trap where the manipulator creates the illusion that you're forever indebted to them, even if their generosity was never asked for or came with hidden strings. This tactic starts with calculated kindness, a favor, a gesture, a gift. Not given freely, but banked, quietly stored away like emotional currency. At first, it feels generous, thoughtful. You might even feel grateful. But slowly, subtly, the energy shifts. The moment you express disagreement, try to assert yourself, or simply need space, that debt is called in. You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for me. I've sacrificed so much for you. You're seriously doing this after everything I've done? Now you're cornered, emotionally blackmailed into compliance. And here's the trick. You're not repaying a debt. You're being manipulated with the illusion of one. This tactic thrives in relationships where boundaries are blurry, families, romantic partners, even bosses or mentors. It weaponizes gratitude. And it's especially potent when the manipulator wraps their guilt-tripping in disappointment or self-pity. You're not ungrateful. You're being groomed to feel guilt you don't actually owe. To resist this tactic, you must ask, did I ask for this favor? Was it freely given or silently tallied? Is this obligation or coercion disguised as care? Real love, real mentorship, real generosity never keeps receipts. So the next time someone slides a moral invoice across the table, you have a right to say, I appreciate what you've done, but I don't owe you my silence, my time, or my obedience. Because the moment they weaponize the past to control your present, they were never being selfless. They were investing, and now they want their return. But you don't have to pay. That's manufactured emotional debt. Level 76. You ever walk away from a conversation hours later, realizing you never actually got your question answered? That's not a coincidence. That's a trap. Tonight, we dissect a technique used not just to evade, but to dominate. This is conversational loop trapping. At first glance, it feels like a normal discussion. You ask a direct question. They respond with a story, an analogy, or another question. So, you try again, and again, and somehow you find yourself in the exact same spot. Like a psychological treadmill, you're running, engaging, nodding, but going nowhere. That's the trap. Loop trapping is when someone deliberately sidesteps resolution by keeping the conversation in motion, not forward, but in circles. The goal isn't miscommunication, it's dominance. You're left doubting your memory, your logic, even your right to ask. And they remain untouched, unaccountable, and in control. There are three layers to this manipulation. Layer 1, redirection. Instead of answering, they pivot. Why would you ask that? Or, well, before we get into that, let me explain this first. This resets the frame. You lose your footing. Layer 2, emotional overlay. They bring in tone, volume, or vulnerability. Maybe they look hurt. Maybe they act shocked. The emotional fog makes it harder to track logic. You feel rude for pressing. You let it go. Layer 3, recursive rhetoric. They loop back to their earlier point, subtly rephrased like it's a fresh response. But it's not. It's the same dodge wearing a different coat. And here's the brilliance. You're participating the entire time. This isn't stonewalling. It's entrapment dressed as dialogue. You think, if I just reword my question one more time? But that's exactly what they want. They don't want silence. They want your effort, your energy, your surrender. This tactic is common in gaslighting relationships, high-pressure sales calls, and even political interviews. The point is not to win. It's to exhaust, to break your will, to pursue clarity. And if you finally stop asking, they win. To counter it, you need a hard cut, not a nicer reframe, not a deeper analogy. You say, I notice we're circling. Let's return to the original question. If they dodge again, you disengage. No closure, no payoff, just silence. That's your power. Because in the world of manipulation, clarity is the enemy. And your insistence on it, that's your shield. Level 77. You pull away, set a boundary, create space, and suddenly, you're the villain. Welcome to one of the most insidious psychological tactics, reframing withdrawal as betrayal. It begins subtly. You're not ghosting. You're not abandoning anyone. You're simply choosing your peace, your time, your agency. But the manipulator sees this not as a decision, but a declaration of war. Here's the dark brilliance. They don't attack directly. They change the frame. Instead of confronting you, they seed guilt. After everything I've done for you, so you're just going to disappear. Wow, that's how little I meant to you. Suddenly, your self-protection becomes selfishness. Your boundary becomes betrayal. What's really happening here? It's an inversion of responsibility. The manipulator turns your healthy action into moral failure. You're cast as disloyal, ungrateful, heartless, not because of what you did, but because you stopped serving their needs. This tactic thrives on a few powerful psychological levers. Social guilt. They tell others you left them when they needed you most. Now you're defending your reputation for simply walking away. Narrative distortion. They rewrite the history of your relationship, filtering out the exploitation, the imbalance, and presenting themselves as the betrayed party. False moral framing. Instead of acknowledging that withdrawal can be a healthy move, they frame it as immoral. Now you're not just walking, you're hurting. This tactic is especially effective on empathetic people, people who care, people who have spent years second-guessing whether their own discomfort is valid, and that's exactly who manipulators target. Here's what makes this tactic dangerous. It doesn't just aim to pull you back. It aims to poison the exit, to make you feel like disengaging isn't just hard, it's wrong. So how do you protect yourself? Name the frame. If someone equates your absence with betrayal, recognize what they're doing. Refuse moral bait. You are allowed to exit relationships, roles, or conversations that damage you. Guard your narrative. Manipulators often rewrite the past to guilt you. Don't give them the pen. Because the darkest trick here is convincing you that your own boundary makes you a bad person. It doesn't. Level 78. You're in a conversation. It seems normal, light even, but something's off. Later, they snap, "Wow, I guess it didn't occur to you to ask how I was doing." You freeze, not because you were cruel, but because you didn't know you were being tested. Welcome to reverse empathy testing, where the manipulator withholds emotional information but still expects you to read it, anticipate it, validate it, without being told a thing. This tactic is dark because it punishes you for not noticing what was never shared. It's not communication. It's a trap. And here's how it works. They seed emotional tension, go quiet, shift tone, but instead of speaking up, they wait. They want to see if you'll notice their shift, drop everything, and attend to their feelings. If you do, you pass the test. For now. If you don't, you've confirmed their internal script. People always miss my pain. I can't trust anyone. You become the villain in a play you didn't audition for. And the worst part, you're not allowed to defend yourself, because doing so just proves their point. See, you don't even care that you hurt me. This is manipulation, not emotional depth. It leverages guilt through silence, weaponizes empathy, and slowly conditions you to walk on eggshells, constantly scanning for invisible distress signals. Over time, it reshapes your behavior. You start second-guessing your words. You preemptively apologize. You shrink your joy, just in case they're in a bad place you weren't warned about. This isn't kindness, it's control. Because the end goal of reverse empathy testing isn't connection. It's emotional obedience. The manipulator wants a partner who proves their worth by intuiting every mood swing and taking responsibility for it. That's not love. That's servitude. So how do you fight back? 1. Stop rewarding the test. If someone wants care, let them use words. Mind reading is not a love language. 2. Ask direct questions, but don't chase clarity they refuse to give. 3. Hold your line. If empathy is demanded through punishment, it's not empathy. It's leverage. The brutal truth: if someone truly wanted you to understand, they'd make sure you could. Level 79. You offer to help carry their bag. They pause. Actually, I prefer if people don't touch my stuff. It's a simple request, reasonable even, but it's followed by dozens more. Please don't use that emoji with me. Don't ever text me after 9 p.m. I only reply when the energy feels right. What starts as respect for preferences becomes an obstacle course of micro-boundaries, tiny rules designed less to protect and more to control. Welcome to Level 79, micro-boundaries as power plays. These aren't healthy boundaries. These are strategically scattered tripwires, placed to shift the emotional balance. The point? To force you into a hyper-vigilant state, where you adapt, you adjust, and you absorb the blame when you cross a line you didn't even know existed. Here's how the manipulation works. Each micro-boundary gives the illusion of vulnerability. It says, "I'm just expressing my needs." But in reality, it builds a maze. And in that maze, you're the one who's always unsure, always apologizing, always working just a bit harder to avoid the next emotional landmine. They're not asking for space. They're training you to anticipate discomfort and take responsibility for soothing it. Why does this work? Because it mimics real trauma-informed behavior. So if you question it, you seem insensitive. If you resist it, you become unsafe. If you step away, you're abandoning someone trying to heal. You don't realize what's happening until your own boundaries have eroded completely. Suddenly, their preferences define the relationship. Their comfort determines your speech. Their sensitivities override your autonomy. That's not regulation. That's domination, one polite request at a time. So how do you defend yourself? Step 1. Recognize the pattern. A healthy boundary clarifies. It doesn't confuse. It protects both sides, not just one. Step 2. Ask yourself, are you constantly shrinking to fit their rules? Or are you growing alongside mutual respect? Step 3. Set your own terms. Boundaries are a two-way street. If they won't respect yours, theirs become demands, not agreements. And the core truth, someone who needs control to feel safe will never feel safe enough to stop controlling. Level 80. You were never told what to do. No threats, no commands, just atmosphere. They didn't ask you to change, but you did. You softened your voice. You avoided certain words. You adjusted your tone, your posture, your opinions. Why? Because you were trained without knowing you were trained. This is obedience by osmosis. Control not through orders, but through emotional climate. It begins innocently. You spend time with them. You want to be liked. You start noticing who gets praised, who gets ignored, which jokes land, which beliefs get a pause, a sigh, a glance. Nothing is said outright, but you start to mirror, not to please, to survive. There's no direct manipulation, just a slow drift. You're learning the rules they never speak. Avoid certain phrases. Echo their phrasing. Downplay your views. Laugh at what they laugh at. It becomes second nature. Until your instincts no longer belong to you. You weren't coerced. You were absorbed. The genius of this tactic? It bypasses resistance. You don't rebel against it, because nothing feels forced. You feel like you've grown, like you're adapting. But what you've actually done is surrendered, and they didn't even have to ask. This is weaponized comfort. It's not domination. It's atmospheric obedience, a silent shaping of your behavior through a culture they curate. You bend, not to commands, but to the invisible rules of the room. How do you spot it? Ask yourself, would I say this if they weren't here? Am I walking on eggshells no one placed? Is their silence louder than their words? If the answer is yes, you're not being controlled. You're being conditioned, and you'll thank them for it. Level 81. You're in a group chat. One person drops a vague, emotionally loaded message. It's fine. Just forget it. Doesn't matter anymore. They don't name names. They don't explain. But you feel the pressure to check in, to ask, to show you care. Now imagine this happens repeatedly. Always vague, always emotionally charged, and always in front of others. That's competitive empathy triggering, the dark tactic of manufacturing emotional tension among peers so they compete for the manipulator's approval, comfort, or attention. It's not just about oversharing. It's about weaponizing vulnerability to trigger a race for emotional validation. The manipulator drops subtle signals, a sigh, a cryptic post, a sad emoji in a story. People rush in. Are you okay? The one who asks first earns points. The one who doesn't? Marked as emotionally negligent. Now the dynamic shifts. You're no longer showing empathy because you feel it. You're doing it because you're being measured against others. This tactic turns basic human kindness into a performance sport. In toxic friendships, it looks like guilt trips layered under emotional crises. In relationships, it's used to test loyalty. I just thought you, of all people, would have noticed. In workplaces, it's masked as burnout signaling, fishing for validation while isolating colleagues who don't respond quickly enough. The goal? To create hierarchies of care, where emotional responsiveness is currency and neglect, even imagined, is punished. People caught in this loop start overperforming emotionally, afraid they'll lose connection, status, or affection. It's not just draining, it's destabilizing. You start asking, did I do enough? Why did they respond to her and not me? What if they think I don't care? Empathy, a strength, is hijacked and turned into a weakness. That's the genius and cruelty of this manipulation. To defend yourself, don't compete for closeness based on how quickly or intensely you respond to distress signals. Pause. Reflect. If empathy feels like a scoreboard, someone else is holding the pen. And that's how competitive empathy triggering traps you. Not with force, but with guilt, comparison, and emotional bait. Level 82. They say things like, I don't usually connect with people like this. You're not like the others. I don't say this often, but you're different. It's intoxicating. You feel chosen, set apart, rare. This is manufactured specialness scarcity, a psychological trap where the manipulator frames your value as uniquely limited, not because it's true, but because it makes you easier to control. It's a con dressed as intimacy. The key isn't flattery, it's scarcity. You're not just being complimented. You're being told this attention is rare, unrepeatable, and fragile. So now you'll do more to protect it. Why? Because humans overvalue what's scarce, not what's genuine. It's not, you're amazing. It's, you're the only one I've ever said this to. That twist changes everything. Suddenly, any threat to that special connection feels like a crisis. You fear being replaced. You chase reassurance. You walk on eggshells to maintain your position as the exception. And if you ever pull away, they don't beg. They simply offer that same "you're different" line to someone else. Now you're hooked not on love, approval, or connection. You're hooked on being irreplaceable. This tactic thrives in early relationships, both romantic and professional. A boss might say, I've never trusted someone this fast. A date might claim, I never open up like this. In both cases, it's about accelerating your emotional investment by faking rarity. But here's the twist. If someone constantly emphasizes how rare their praise or connection is, it probably isn't. It's a script, a lure, not a mirror. To protect yourself, watch for patterns. Do they say the same special lines to others? Do they yank away that closeness to make you work for it? Remember, real rarity doesn't need to be announced, and being truly valued shouldn't feel like a competition for oxygen. Level 83. You're becoming stronger. Maybe you've started setting boundaries. Maybe you no longer laugh at jokes that degrade you. Maybe you've stopped over-explaining yourself to keep people comfortable. And then someone says it. You've changed. It sounds casual, even observational. But behind it is a weapon. This is the "you've changed" guilt frame. It's not about change. It's about control. Here's how it works. The person saying it isn't mourning who you were. They're mourning who you were to them. Maybe you used to say yes to everything. Maybe you kept quiet to avoid conflict. Maybe you tolerated emotional games just to keep the peace. But now you don't. And that's a threat. So they reframe your growth as betrayal. You've changed isn't a compliment. It's a test. A probe to see if you'll shrink back into the version of you they could influence. It weaponizes nostalgia. They miss the old you, not because you were better, but because you were easier to manage. This tactic relies on guilt, not overt attacks, just soft pressure. You used to be more fun. You used to let things go. You never used to act like this. Translation: you used to let me win. But you are not required to stay static for someone else's comfort. Growth isn't disloyalty. Evolving isn't a personal offense. You're not obligated to regress to validate someone's memory of you. When they say, you've changed, hear it for what it really is. You've stopped playing your old role. And that's not your problem. Level 84. You're not being asked, you're being drafted into someone else's unfinished legacy. Legacy leverage is a manipulation that uses your ancestry, your bloodline, or your family's past to trap you into obedience. It doesn't command, it implies, it doesn't yell, it reminisces. You'll hear, your grandfather built this with his bare hands. Your mother worked 2 jobs to keep this going. It's your name. Don't let it end here. These aren't reminders, they're emotional shackles. It's not about pride, it's about guilt. Not obligation, but inherited sacrifice repackaged as duty. This tactic is dangerous because it hijacks one of our deepest psychological drives, the need for continuity, for belonging, for being part of something bigger. You're not just failing at something, you're betraying your lineage. The manipulation works by layering selective storytelling. They cherry-pick the most heroic tales of past struggle, implied expectation. The message is, people before you endured pain. You owe them progress. Emotional identity anchoring. You're told you're different if you walk away. Cold, ungrateful, weak. It sounds noble, but it's a trap. Because here's the truth. A legacy is not a chain. It's supposed to be a launch pad, not a leash. When someone uses the past to control your future, they're not honoring tradition. They're preserving control. Your counter-move. Ask yourself, if I didn't share blood with these people, would I still choose this? If the answer is no, step back. You don't owe your identity to someone else's unfinished dreams. You can love where you came from and still walk away. Respect for your roots doesn't mean dying in the same soil. Level 85. You meet someone brilliant, accomplished, admired, but instead of owning it, they say, "Oh, I just got lucky. Anyone could have done what I did." Honestly, it's not that impressive. You're disarmed. They seem down to earth, modest, safe. But sometimes it's a trap. Manufactured humility is a manipulation tactic where someone fakes modesty to lower your guard, gain moral high ground, and tighten their grip on control, all while appearing virtuous. It's psychological Aikido. They deflect praise not to reject it, but to own it more deeply. Because when someone shrinks themselves in your eyes, your instinct is to lift them back up. You admire them more, trust them more. They didn't brag, so they must be authentic, right? Wrong. This tactic works because modesty is a status amplifier in disguise. Fake humility says, "I'm better than you, but I'll pretend not to be, so you feel safe surrendering power to me." They win your trust. They control the narrative. And worst of all, they do it while looking like the good guy. You'll see this move in influencers who say they accidentally blew up online after months of strategic posting. Executives who reluctantly take leadership roles while orchestrating the entire succession plan. Romantic partners who say, "I don't think I'm much," so you chase their validation instead. Here's how it works. 1. Status masking. They camouflage dominance with modesty. 2. Reverse elevation. You praise them harder because they won't do it themselves. 3. Moral leverage. They become immune to criticism. After all, how could someone so humble be manipulative? But remember this. Real humility is quiet confidence. Manufactured humility is social armor with a hidden blade. Your countermove. Listen for patterns, not one-off comments. Do they constantly downplay wins in public but crave admiration in private? Do they fish for contradiction, waiting for you to say, "No, you're amazing"? If so, you're not dealing with humility. You're dealing with performance. And the best response to performance is clarity. Name the value, respect the effort, but never let false modesty blind you to a hidden agenda. Level 86. They start fast, a flood of words, a surge of stories, emotional confessions, intimate details, rapid-fire vulnerability. You barely get a breath. Then, silence, gone, cold, unreachable. That's not social awkwardness, that's a tactic. Conversational flood and retreat is a psychological maneuver where someone overwhelms you with intensity, then disappears. It's not about connection. It's about destabilization, because when someone opens up fast, you feel closer. Your defenses drop. You respond with your own secrets. You accelerate the bond. But then, they pull back. You're left wondering, did I overshare? Did I do something wrong? Where did they go? This mental gap becomes a loop you can't close. And that's where control begins. Now you're invested. You want closure. And when they reappear, you're even more responsive, just for the chance to finish what they started. This tactic works in 3 steps. Step 1, flood the channel. Create false intimacy through intense, one-sided communication. Step 2, retreat without warning. Leave the conversation unresolved. Step 3, return on their terms. Regain control by deciding when the connection resumes. You'll see this in dating apps. A long message chain, deep emotional confessions. Then days of silence. When they return, they act like nothing happened. In toxic friendships, they trauma dump, then ghost. You feel obligated to check on them. You're now emotionally tethered. Even in leadership, a manager gives you praise, makes promises, floods you with attention, then disappears during crunch time. The retreat isn't weakness, it's a power play. The silence creates hunger. Your countermove? Don't confuse volume for value. If someone leads with oversharing, ask, what's their goal? And if they vanish afterward, don't chase. Don't fill in their silence with your anxiety. Flood and retreat thrives on imbalance. Break the cycle by staying grounded. You don't owe closure to someone who weaponizes confusion. Level 87. They smile while planting a trap. You probably won't want to help, and that's okay. I get it. You're super busy, I totally understand. No pressure, unless you can do something. On the surface, these sound like polite disclaimers, but they're not. They're psychological landmines designed to explode in your conscience later. This is predictive guilt seeding, a manipulation tactic where someone anticipates your refusal or resistance and plants emotional consequences before you've even made a decision. By the time you respond, the guilt's already in place, and it's growing roots. Why does it work? Because humans want to be consistent with how we're perceived. When someone paints you as likely to disappoint, your brain rebels. You feel the need to prove them wrong, even if you had no intention of helping before. It's reverse psychology wrapped in guilt. Here's how it shows up. A coworker says, I know you're way too slammed to help with this, so I'll just try to figure it out myself. Translation: say no, and you're selfish. A friend says, you probably have better things to do than talk to me right now. Translation: respond, or you're abandoning me emotionally. A partner says, you're probably not the kind of person who'd remember little things like anniversaries. Translation: if you forget, it confirms I can't count on you. It's not always malicious, but it is strategic. Predictive guilt seeding creates a trap door, one where any decision other than compliance makes you look and feel like a bad person. It shifts the emotional labor onto you, forces you to manage their expectations, and rewrites your motivation. You didn't help because you wanted to. You helped because they made you feel bad not to. How do you fight back? First, name it, out loud or to yourself. This sounds like I'm being set up to feel guilty. Second, don't correct their prediction out of obligation. You don't have to prove your goodness to someone using guilt as currency. And third, remember, boundaries that provoke guilt aren't boundaries. They're leashes. Level 88. You pride yourself on being honest, or loyal, or strong. Now imagine someone turns that identity against you. Wow, I thought you were the kind of person who kept their word. I guess I was wrong about you being dependable. Didn't peg you as the selfish type. This is strategic identity shaming, when someone manipulates your actions by attacking the identity you've worked hard to uphold. It's not about what you did. It's about who you are or who you're supposed to be. And that's why it works so well. People won't always defend their behavior, but they'll always defend their identity. This tactic thrives in relationships where the manipulator has learned your values. If you value being generous, they'll frame a boundary as greed. If you value independence, they'll suggest you're weak for needing help. And if you're proud of being emotionally available, they'll accuse you of being cold the moment you say no. The goal? To create a psychological dilemma where your only way to protect your identity is to cave. It doesn't need yelling, just a slow shake of the head, a disappointed tone, a weaponized sigh. That's the genius. They don't argue facts. They challenge who you are. And in doing so, they rewrite your boundaries as betrayals, and your resistance as proof that you're not who you claim to be. So how do you fight back? You detach your actions from your identity. You remind yourself, saying no doesn't make me selfish. Protecting my time doesn't make me unreliable. Having limits doesn't mean I'm cold. Recognize the shame frame. Name it. Then reject the false mirror. Because anyone who makes you prove your identity through obedience doesn't actually respect who you are. They just want to control what you do. Level 89. Emotional ostracism conditioning. You show up in the group chat. Conversations flow. Inside jokes bounce around. Plans are made. But your last message? Ignored. Your name? Not mentioned. You're not excluded. You're just invisible. Later, when you fall back in line, play nice and make yourself small. They shower you with attention. We missed you. You good? Haven't heard from you in a bit. It feels warm, safe, but it's not kindness. It's a behavioral correction loop. This is emotional ostracism conditioning, a tactic that uses silence as punishment and selective inclusion as reward. You're being trained, not openly, but covertly, through absence. The cruelty is soft. No confrontation, no accusations, just a quiet removal of warmth until your nervous system starts rewriting your behavior for survival. Your brain links isolation with threat, so it adapts. You self-censor, overanalyze. You soften your edges, shrink your presence, hoping to be reaccepted. And when you're good, they pull you back in, with praise, smiles, inclusion. But that inclusion is now conditional, not based on who you are, but on how well you obey. The worst part? You might not even realize it's happening, because they'll still smile, still act like friends, still pretend it's all love. But love doesn't train you to fear silence, and real connection doesn't make you earn your right to exist in a room. This tactic isn't loud, it's not dramatic, but it's surgical in its damage, and it works, because humans are wired to belong. Level 90, you're grieving. Maybe someone close passed away. Maybe a life chapter ended. It's quiet, heavy, and just when you're most broken, someone appears. They bring food. They check in. They say all the right things. They seem like a godsend, but their comfort has a price, one you don't notice until it's already been paid. This is grief hijack. It's not support. It's strategy. They insert themselves during your trauma. They offer help, not out of love, but opportunity. Your emotional guard is down, your thoughts are scattered, and they move in quietly as a permanent fixture in your healing. They don't just comfort, they begin to define what comfort looks like. And slowly your decisions start echoing their voice. You lose your job, and they offer to cover your rent. They say, "Don't worry, I've got you." But later you hear them speaking about you like you're incapable. They say things like, "They're still too fragile to deal with this." They speak for you, decide for you, and when you push back, they act hurt. "After all I did for you?" That phrase becomes a leash. They remind you often what they sacrificed. They paint themselves as your emotional savior. You start doubting your independence. You feel indebted, but also trapped. This isn't about generosity, it's about power. They don't want you healed, they want you tethered. Grief hijackers don't wait until you're ready to stand again. They clip your legs and call it caretaking. And they don't need you to thank them. They just need you to never leave. But here's the truth. Real support strengthens you. It doesn't shadow you. If someone's help becomes a story you're forced to repeat, if it's leveraged as control, it's not help. It's manipulation, wrapped in a hug. Grief is sacred. It shouldn't be harvested. So if someone uses your lowest moment to buy long-term influence, they were never your healer. They were your captor. Level 91. She smiles at your jokes, notices your routines, asks questions that seem casual. What's your star sign? Are you more of a thinker or a feeler? You don't think much of it, just small talk. But they're not just getting to know you. They're building a file. This is personality profiling, not the kind used in therapy or job interviews, but the kind used by manipulators to tailor-make control. They study you like a system to be hacked. Your insecurities, your core values, the compliments that make you melt. They'll test boundaries in the name of banter. They'll observe what you tolerate when you flinch, what you rush to defend. And once they have the data, they stop adapting. They start weaponizing. If you crave validation, they drip-feed praise just enough to keep you chasing. If you fear abandonment, they'll make affection conditional. If you pride yourself on loyalty, they'll frame toxic demands as tests of devotion. You're not reacting randomly. They've mapped the terrain. And every reaction you give sharpens their accuracy. You think the connection is real. It feels like someone finally gets you. But that's the illusion. You're not being seen. You're being decoded. And once they've nailed your type, people pleaser, perfectionist, rebel, empath, they build a manipulation plan around it. They know exactly what version of themselves to become to disarm you, what language to use, what fears to poke, what dreams to mirror. It's social engineering on a personal scale. And the scariest part? You won't even realize it's happening until you're too entangled to pull free. You'll defend them. You'll explain away the red flags. They're just intense. They care a lot. They've studied how to make you ignore your own instincts. This isn't charm. It's architecture. True connection doesn't require psychological excavation. It doesn't play chess with your personality traits. It grows from mutual respect, not manipulation masked as chemistry. So next time someone seems to get you a little too well, too fast, pause. Ask yourself, are they relating or are they profiling? Level 92. You raise a concern. It's calm, fair, maybe even timid. But before your sentence is finished, they've climbed the ladder of morality and pulled it up behind them. How dare you question my intentions? I always try to do the right thing. You've just entered the moral high ground loop, a psychological trap where the manipulator seizes the role of moral authority, shutting down all criticism by framing themselves as ethically untouchable. Now, any disagreement isn't just disagreement, it's immorality. If you push back, you're labeled selfish, toxic, or problematic, and the more you try to clarify, the deeper you sink. Because the trap isn't built on logic, it's built on moral performance. The trick is subtle. They don't argue facts. They argue virtue. They shift the conversation from what happened to what kind of person they are. And by preemptively taking the high ground, they force you into a defensive crouch. Even when they're clearly in the wrong, they'll posture as the wounded idealist, the good person unfairly attacked. Suddenly, you are on trial for questioning someone so noble. They'll quote values they don't live by, use empathy as armor, weaponize kindness, and if you dare to call it out, you're accused of being bitter, petty, or just not as evolved. It's psychological sleight of hand. And here's the kicker. They don't need to actually believe what they're saying. They just need you to. Because once they lock you into the moral loop, they control the terms of every future conversation. You'll find yourself apologizing for your tone rather than standing firm on your point. You'll edit your feelings to appear more gracious. You'll tolerate harm just to avoid seeming cruel. It's not just exhausting, it's disorienting. Because over time, your internal compass bends. You start to second-guess your own reactions, wondering if you're the one overstepping, when in fact, you're being steered by someone who's mastered the art of righteous deflection. True morality doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need applause. And it definitely doesn't require silencing others to shine. So the next time someone clambers up a moral pedestal mid-argument, pause. Ask yourself, are they defending a principle or just protecting control? This was level 92, moral high ground loop. Level 93. You're sitting across from someone who claims they just want honesty. Be real with me, they say with a calm, inviting tone. So you tell the truth, not the polished, PR-safe version, the raw one. Maybe it's something vulnerable, or complicated, or shameful. You share it because it feels like the door is finally open. But what you don't realize is, the door only opened so they could lock you in. That truth you gave, it becomes ammunition. It'll resurface in an argument. It'll be twisted, reframed, used to paint you as unstable, ungrateful, inconsistent. And every time you try to pull back, they'll remind you of what you said. Not even falsely, just selectively, deviously. This is truth as a weapon, the tactic where someone invites your vulnerability, only to weaponize it later. The honesty you gave them in good faith is stripped of context and redeployed like a sniper shot. It's not about lies. It's about using facts with malicious timing, tone, or framing. The worst part? You can't argue with the accuracy, but it still destroys you. This tactic shows up in narcissistic relationships. You tell them about your childhood trauma. They use it to justify why you're too sensitive. You admit your fear of abandonment. Suddenly, that becomes why they need space. In public, they'll act like you're irrational or dramatic, and then quote something deeply personal that you once shared in confidence. And it works, because it's technically true. They don't have to fabricate anything. They just make the truth cut the wrong way. You start second-guessing yourself, regretting that you ever opened up. That's the final trap. You become emotionally disarmed. You either shut down and go numb, or you over-explain everything just to protect yourself from the next twist. And the person holding the weapon? They stay clean. I'm just being honest, they'll say. You said it yourself. That's how this tactic thrives. It masquerades as transparency. It wears the mask of emotional intimacy. But it's really surveillance, a way to catalog your soft spots for future control. So, if someone seems overly eager to extract your truths, but never shares their own, if your honest moments come back as daggers, or if you're made to feel unsafe in the very act of opening up, you're not being heard, you're being armed against. The antidote? Discernment. Not paranoia, discernment. Emotional safety isn't measured by how much someone asks. It's revealed by what they do after you answer. Watch for consistency, reciprocity, context preservation. If someone only values your truth when it's convenient to them, they never valued it at all. Honesty isn't just about facts, it's about intent. And when truth becomes a blade, you have every right to sheath your story. Level 94. You walk into a high-end store. A jacket on display costs $2,000. You scoff. No way. But just next to it, another jacket, similar style, is marked down to $480. Suddenly, that second one feels like a deal. You're not thinking, do I need this? You're thinking, look how much I'm saving. You've just been anchored. Now take that psychology and turn it darker. Welcome to value mirage anchoring, the manipulation where inflated values, fake comparisons, or exaggerated alternatives are used to distort your perception of what's reasonable, what's valuable, and what's worth it. This isn't just sales, it's psychological warping. In toxic relationships, it shows up as, most people wouldn't put up with your issues. I'm the only one who would. Suddenly, your bare minimum partner feels like a saint. In workplaces, this project would cost 100 grand with an agency. You're lucky we're letting you handle it in-house. You feel gratitude for exploitation. In cult-like communities, other people are stuck in the matrix. Here, you're getting priceless knowledge. When in reality, you're getting nothing you couldn't find on page 1 of Google. The mirage works by establishing an extreme anchor first, a price, a punishment, a problem, then offering you a manipulated alternative that only feels good because of what you were just shown. It doesn't need to be true, it just needs to feel like contrast. The danger? Once you've been anchored, your baseline shifts. You start comparing everything to the fake extreme, not reality. You stay in a bad relationship because it could be worse. You tolerate a manipulative boss because they're not as bad as your last one. You accept crumbs because someone convinced you the original loaf was never meant for you anyway. And when you complain, they say, "You think this is bad? You should see what others go through." They use other people's trauma, or invented struggles, to silence yours. That's the genius of this tactic. It's not about making things better. It's about making you forget what better even looked like. The antidote? Reset your anchors. Step outside the comparisons they feed you. Ask, what would this look like if I had never seen their version of normal? Would I want this? Would I choose this? Don't let someone sell you a mirage and call it water. Sometimes the only thing keeping you stuck is the illusion of a good deal. Level 95. You're asked for a favor. You hesitate. And then comes the line. I know you're busy, but some people make time for those they care about. Just like that, your time, your schedule, your boundaries becomes proof of your loyalty or your betrayal. Welcome to the time scarcity shame loop, a manipulation tactic that turns time itself into a moral weapon. Here's how it works. The manipulator knows you're overwhelmed, that you're stretched thin. They wait for that moment when you're tired, distracted, emotionally drained. And then they ask, not for anything outrageous, just a small thing, a call, a ride, a task. If you say yes, good. They tighten the loop. If you say no, now you're selfish, unreliable, not who they thought you were. Suddenly, it's not about the favor. It's about your character. They might say, you always have time for others. Wow, I guess I know where I stand now. Or worse, say nothing. Just let the silence accuse you. You find yourself explaining, justifying, apologizing, and that's the loop. You're always failing to show up in the way they've decided proves your worth. It creates a cycle. They ask, you hesitate, they shame, you comply, just to silence the guilt. Next time, they ask for more, and the noose tightens. Your availability becomes a test. Your exhaustion becomes a flaw. Your boundaries, a betrayal. Here's the truth. Respect isn't measured by access. Love isn't proven by depletion. And people who weaponize your time don't value you. They consume you. Break the loop. Level 96. You're praised for your kindness. You're the good one, the helper, the one who always shows up. And deep down, you like that identity. You've built a reputation on it. They know that. So when they come to you again, needing something, asking for more, they don't beg. They admire. You've always been so generous, not like others. And now, you're trapped. Because saying no, that's not just denying a favor. It's betraying the version of yourself they made you believe you are. This is altruism framing for exploitation. A manipulation tactic that turns your empathy into a leash and your self-worth into currency they can spend. It's not about direct control. It's about narrative. They don't coerce you. They remind you of the stories people tell about you, remind you of how many people need you, remind you of the damage it would do if you stopped giving. Even your burnout becomes framed as selfishness. Don't worry if you can't, though I thought you were different. You used to care more. They don't have to twist your arm. They twist your identity. And if you resist long enough, they'll recycle your past kindness as proof you owe them now. It's weaponized virtue. They manufacture a moral trap, then dare you to escape it without looking like the villain. Here's what they never tell you. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to choose where your energy goes. And no one, not even the grateful, gets unlimited access to your soul. If they only loved you when you were useful, they never loved you. They consumed you. Level 97, you're at your lowest, broken, exhausted, and alone. Then, just when you're about to snap, someone steps in. They help. They listen. They save you. Relief floods your system. Gratitude, too. Maybe even love. But here's the twist. They're the one who dragged you into the pit to begin with. This is despair loop conditioning, a psychological tactic where a manipulator engineers your descent into despair just so they can rescue you from it, over and over again. They become your savior, your lifeline, your emotional oxygen mask. At first, the chaos seems random, a fight here, a withdrawal there. But with time, a pattern forms. The pain always comes before the comfort, and the only person who ever fixes it is them. You don't realize it, but your nervous system starts forming an association. Distress equals them. Relief equals them. Safety equals them. And just like that, you're hooked. The victim begins to rely on the abuser's emotional regulation. They lose trust in their own ability to self-soothe. They stop seeking help elsewhere, and they start believing, I need them to survive. This isn't support. It's engineered dependence, a trauma cycle on a leash. Despair loop conditioning is what happens when the same hand that pushes you under pulls you up just enough so you'll thank it. And by then, you're too deep in to see who's drowning who. Level 98. You're constantly told you're brave for doing the bare minimum, told you're fragile whenever you show strength. You begin to second-guess your instincts, doubt your abilities, and slowly, over time, you stop trying. This is manufactured helplessness, when someone conditions you to believe you're incapable so they can control your decisions, your confidence, and ultimately, your freedom. It starts small. They help with things you could have done yourself, correct you when you're not wrong, redefine kindness as dependency, and convince you that their protection is a privilege, not a prison. Every mistake you make, evidence you need them. Every success, dismissed as a fluke or credited to their guidance. The goal isn't just obedience, it's identity erosion. They don't want a partner, they want a puppet who fears autonomy. Eventually, you stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What would they approve of?" You become so unsure of yourself that independence feels dangerous, like stepping into traffic without looking, and they're always there, hand on your shoulder, smile on their face, whispering, "You wouldn't survive without me." But here's the truth. You're not helpless. You've just been convinced you are by someone who benefits when you stay small. Manufactured helplessness is the softest cage with the strongest bars, and the key was never out of reach. Level 99, they break you, then they bandage you, and when you thank them for saving you, they tighten the leash. This is the savior dependency loop, one of the most insidious psychological manipulations known. It's when someone creates or magnifies your suffering just so they can be the one to rescue you. Over and over again. At first, they're your hero. They show up when things go wrong. They help you feel safe. They fix what's broken. But what you don't see is this. They're the ones causing the cracks. They stir chaos behind the scenes, sabotage your confidence, pull strings to isolate you so only they seem like the solution. And each time they rescue you, they deepen the illusion that your survival depends on them, that your healing is only possible through them, that without them, you're lost. It's emotional debt, disguised as devotion. You stop questioning their intentions. You tolerate more control, because the person who hurts you is also the only one who helps you heal. It's a loop of harm and relief, pain and comfort, imprisonment and rescue, until you forget which way is up, and you can't tell if they're saving you or drowning you slowly. But make no mistake, a true savior doesn't need to be your captor first, and real love doesn't require you to bleed for comfort. The savior dependency loop feels like loyalty, but it's a trap, one where the chain is gratitude. Level 100. They don't need to control you with fear, guilt, or flattery. They just convince you that they're better than you. Morally, spiritually, ethically. And suddenly your resistance dies in silence. This is the ethical superiority trap, the final tactic in our descent. The darkest, the most insidious. Because it doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like virtue. Here's how it works. They claim the moral high ground, not through quiet integrity, but through loud strategic righteousness. They weaponize values. Empathy becomes a tool for leverage. Activism becomes a shield against criticism. Forgiveness becomes a leash they yank when needed. They never yell. They don't have to. Their tone is calm, measured, disappointed. They don't accuse you. They imply that your choices are selfish, your views are ignorant, your emotions are immature, and worst of all, they make you ashamed for even questioning them, because doubting them feels like doubting goodness itself. So you self-correct, you shrink, you chase their approval, not because you admire them, but because their disapproval feels like exile from moral belonging. You start playing by their rules, not because they're right, but because they've defined what right even means. This isn't integrity. This is domination through righteousness. The ethical superiority trap doesn't just control what you do. It rewires what you believe is right to do. And by the time you see the game, you've already handed over your voice, in exchange for being seen as one of the good ones. This isn't morality, it's obedience in disguise. And this is where our descent ends.